Story 1, she confessed to me, "My feelings for you are real, just not the love kind." Her friends praised her raw honesty. My calm reply was just, "I appreciate the transparency." What I didn't tell her was that I'd been planning to propose in 3 weeks, and that single sentence had just saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Sometimes the universe protects you in the most unexpected ways. I was reviewing quarterly reports in our shared home office on a Tuesday evening when Amber interrupted my work with what was clearly a rehearsed speech about having real feelings, but not the love kind. I'm a financial consultant, so I process information with the same analytical precision I use for client portfolios, and her words hit me like a comprehensive audit revealing massive structural problems. "Tyler, I need to be completely honest with you about something," she began, standing in the doorway like she was delivering a presentation to the board. "My feelings for you are absolutely real and deep, just not the romantic love kind. I care about you more than almost anyone in my life, but I've realized I'm not in love with you the way you deserve." I looked up from my spreadsheets, watching her face as she continued. "I think we have something beautiful and authentic, but I need to be transparent about what I can actually offer emotionally." The word, transparent, struck me as particularly ironic, considering she'd been living in our downtown loft for 2 years while I paid most of the rent, planned our future, and apparently fell in love alone. "I appreciate the transparency," I replied, returning to my computer screen and continuing to input data like she just informed me about a scheduled change rather than dismantling our entire relationship. She stood there for another moment, clearly expecting emotional chaos, tears, begging, or at least some kind of dramatic reaction to her brave declaration. Instead, she received a businessman's acknowledgement of updated terms and conditions. "That's it?" she asked, voice rising slightly. "You're not going to say anything else? What would you like me to say?" I asked, genuinely curious while continuing to work on my financial projections. "I appreciate you clarifying the parameters of our relationship. It's helpful information." The confusion on her face was almost amusing. She'd clearly prepared for a much more dramatic scene, probably involving me pleading for her to reconsider or trying to convince her that what we had was special. Instead, I was treating her emotional revelation like a policy update from corporate headquarters. She left the office looking unsettled, immediately calling her book club friends who would later celebrate her emotional maturity and authentic communication, completely unaware that I was already mentally restructuring our entire relationship framework. The man who used to bring her specialty coffee from the downtown cafe every morning and plan surprise weekend getaways was now calculating the exact moment our romantic contract had expired and what that meant for every aspect of our shared domestic economy. I finished my reports that night with unusual focus, my mind surprisingly clear as I began implementing what I would privately call Friend Protocol Alpha. I implemented Friend Protocol Alpha with the systematic precision of a corporate restructuring, treating Amber exactly as I would treat my college buddy Marcus or my sister's friend Kelly. Gone were the morning smoothies I used to make with expensive organic ingredients from the farmer's market, replaced by me making only my own breakfast and washing only my own dishes, while she stood in the kitchen looking confused about the sudden absence of her usual acai bowl with imported honey. "Are you not making smoothies anymore?" she asked on the third morning, watching me prepare my simple coffee and toast. "I'm making my smoothie," I replied, gesturing to my single serving. "You're welcome to use the blender after I'm done." The look of bewilderment on her face was almost comical, like she couldn't comprehend why her breakfast service had been discontinued. When Amber's luxury BMW started making concerning engine noises the following weekend, she approached me with the same expectations she'd had for the past 2 years. "Tyler, my car's making that weird sound again. Can you take a look at it this Saturday?" I glanced up from my laptop where I was researching investment portfolios. "You should probably contact your mechanic or AAA. I think your membership covers diagnostic services." "But you always figure out what's wrong with it," she protested, clearly not understanding why I was suddenly unavailable for automotive troubleshooting. "I used to do that when we were in a romantic relationship," I explained matter-of-factly. Friends don't typically provide free car maintenance. I'm sure any qualified mechanic can help you out. Her favorite artisanal soaps disappeared from our shared bathroom, replaced by generic drugstore brands that I now expected her to contribute to purchasing. The expensive shampoos she loved vanished along with the luxury skincare products I'd been restocking monthly. When she asked about the sudden downgrade in bathroom amenities, I explained that I'd been covering those costs as part of our relationship, but since we were now friends, we should split household expenses more equitably. "I didn't realize you were keeping track of soap expenses," she said, sounding genuinely hurt. "I wasn't keeping track," I replied. "I was just covering them because I thought we were building a future together. Friends typically handle their own personal care products." The shift extended to our entire domestic economy in ways she hadn't anticipated. I stopped picking up her dry cleaning, discontinued her favorite wine subscriptions, and removed her from my Amazon Prime account. When she mentioned wanting to order something online, I suggested she might want to set up her own account since shared delivery benefits seemed more appropriate for couples than friends. Amber initially interpreted these changes as a temporary adjustment period, telling her book club friends that I was processing and would eventually return to normal. She had no idea that I had permanently recalibrated our entire relationship based on her stated parameters, treating her declaration as a binding contract that redefined every aspect of our interaction. The man who used to anticipate her needs and solve her problems before she even asked had transformed into a polite roommate who maintained clear boundaries and expected equal participation in all shared expenses and responsibilities. Amber's birthday arrived 6 weeks after her declaration, and I treated it exactly like any casual friend's birthday, with a simple, "Happy Birthday" text sent at 9:47 m and a $25 gift card to Olive Garden that I picked up during my lunch break. The contrast with previous years was stark and deliberate. Last year, I had orchestrated an elaborate surprise party at the rooftop restaurant where we had our first date, hiring a jazz quartet she loved and flying in her favorite pastry chef from Portland to create a custom cake that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. This year, she received the same level of effort I typically gave to my coworkers' birthdays, polite acknowledgement, and a generic gesture that required minimal planning or emotional investment. "Is this really all you're doing for my birthday?" she asked that evening, holding the gift card like it was evidence of some terrible crime. Her voice carried a mixture of disbelief and wounded pride that I found fascinating from an analytical perspective. "I thought maybe we could do dinner somewhere nice, or at least celebrate together somehow." I looked up from my laptop where I was reviewing client portfolios, genuinely surprised by her expectation. "We can definitely grab dinner if you want. Want to split the cost of that new Thai place downtown? I heard their pad Thai is excellent." The expression on her face shifted through several emotions: confusion, hurt, then something approaching panic as the full implications of our redefined relationship hit her. "Split the cost? Tyler, it's my birthday." "Right, which is why I got you the gift card," I replied, gesturing toward the Olive Garden card sitting on our coffee table. "That should cover your portion of dinner pretty much anywhere you want to go." Her book club friends who had praised her emotional honesty proved mysteriously unavailable for actual birthday celebration, leaving her to spend the evening alone while I attended my monthly chess club meeting at the community center. When she had hinted about dinner plans earlier, I had genuinely offered to split the cost of takeout, like roommates do, using her own framework about our redefined relationship status. The irony wasn't lost on me that the same friends who had celebrated her brave declaration of authentic feelings were nowhere to be found when she needed actual emotional support. "I can't believe you're treating me like this," she said when I returned from chess club around 10 p.m., finding her sitting on our couch, surrounded by the remnants of a solo dinner she'd ordered from DoorDash. "Like what exactly?" I asked, hanging up my jacket and settling into my reading chair with a financial planning book I'd been working through. "Like I don't matter to you at all anymore." I considered her words carefully, the way I would analyze a complex investment scenario. "That's not accurate, Amber. I'm treating you exactly how you asked to be treated, as someone you have real feelings for, just not the love kind. Friends matter to me, but they don't receive romantic gestures, elaborate celebrations, or financial subsidies. This is what authentic friendship looks like. The stark contrast between this birthday and previous years when I had rented entire venues, coordinated with her family, and spent weeks planning surprise elements finally began to crack her confidence in her decision. She stared at me for a long moment, probably realizing for the first time that her declaration had permanent consequences that extended far beyond just changing the label on our relationship. The woman who had praised herself for emotional maturity was discovering that maturity came with adult responsibilities she hadn't anticipated. The hidden financial infrastructure of our relationship became brutally apparent over the following month, when I systematically removed Amber from every shared account, membership, and service that I had been covering as part of our romantic partnership. I started with the health insurance, calmly explaining that my company's premium plan allowed coverage for spouses and dependents, but not for friends who had explicitly clarified their non-romantic feelings. "You're removing me from your health insurance?" she asked, staring at the official notification letter I'd placed on the kitchen counter next to her morning coffee. The annual enrollment period is next month, so I needed to update my beneficiaries and coverage, I explained while reviewing my own insurance options on my laptop. "You'll need to either get coverage through your pottery studio or look into marketplace plans. I can send you some links to help you compare options if you'd like." Her part-time pottery studio, which barely generated $1,500 in monthly revenue, had never offered health benefits, something that hadn't mattered when she was covered under my comprehensive plan that cost me an additional $420 monthly. Next came the Costco membership, my Amazon Prime account, and the family cell phone plan that had been saving her nearly $200 each month. "I don't understand why you're being so systematic about this," she said, watching me update account information on multiple websites while she stood behind my chair like a supervisor reviewing my work. "These are just practical adjustments," I replied, clicking through another account settings page. I was covering these expenses because I thought we were building a shared financial future. "Since you've clarified that we're friends, it makes sense to separate our accounts and let each person handle their own memberships and services." The luxury gym membership disappeared along with the high-end streaming services and monthly wine club deliveries that I had been treating as relationship investments rather than keeping a detailed ledger. When her favorite yoga studio charged her credit card $350 for the monthly unlimited package she'd been enjoying, reality hit with mathematical precision. "I had no idea you were paying for all of this," she admitted, sitting across from me at our dining table while reviewing a stack of bills that had suddenly become her responsibility. "I wasn't paying for things," I corrected, looking up from my own financial planning spreadsheet. "I was investing in our shared lifestyle because I thought we were partners building something together. There's a significant difference between charity and investment." Her credit card, which she had assumed was her own account, turned out to be a secondary card on my excellent credit profile, something I discovered when reviewing my monthly statements. Canceling it left her scrambling to establish her own financial identity with her limited income and virtually non-existent credit history. "Tyler, my credit score is apparently 540, she said, staring at her phone screen in disbelief after applying for her first independent credit card. "How is that even possible? You've never actually built credit in your own name," I explained, continuing to work on my quarterly budget projections. "The card you've been using was attached to my account, so all the positive payment history was building my credit, not yours. You'll need to start with a secured card or maybe ask your bank about starter options." When her car insurance premium jumped to $412 monthly without my multi-vehicle discount, the true cost of her honest feelings declaration began hitting her bank account with relentless mathematical precision. I had been subsidizing her lifestyle to the tune of over $3,000 monthly, treating it as an investment in our shared future rather than keeping score, and she was discovering that independence came with a price tag she had never calculated. The woman who had praised herself for emotional authenticity was learning that authentic adult relationships required authentic adult financial responsibility. Desperate to provoke any emotional reaction that would prove I still cared about her romantically, Amber began staging increasingly dramatic scenarios designed to crack my new friendship-only demeanor. She started leaving her pottery projects strategically placed throughout our shared workspace, beautiful ceramic pieces that she knew I had always admired, hoping I would comment on them the way I used to when I would spend 20 minutes analyzing her artistic techniques and encouraging her creative development. Instead, I simply moved them to appropriate storage areas when they interfered with my own work, treating them like any roommate would handle someone else's belongings left in common spaces. "You used to love talking about my art," she said one evening, watching me carefully relocate a glazed vase she had positioned directly in front of my computer monitor. "It's beautiful work," I replied, setting it on the designated art shelf we had established for her pieces. "I'm sure your pottery studio customers appreciate your skill." The clinical tone of my response, like I was commenting on a stranger's work at a gallery opening, visibly frustrated her. She began playing our old anniversary playlist on repeat through the house speakers, filling our loft with songs that had soundtracked romantic dinners, weekend trips, and quiet evenings when we used to plan our future together. I responded by purchasing noise-canceling headphones and continuing my work without acknowledging the musical manipulation, treating her emotional soundtrack like background noise that had no relevance to my current activities. "Don't you remember what that song means to us?" she asked during a particularly obvious attempt when she played the song from our first dance at her sister's wedding. "I remember it was playing at Rachel's wedding," I replied, not looking up from my financial reports. "Nice song. I should probably get some work done though." When she accidentally started wearing my dress shirts around the house, the same one she used to borrow for lazy Sunday mornings when we would cook breakfast together and read the newspaper in bed, I responded with the practical concern of a responsible roommate. "You've got several of my shirts," I mentioned casually while doing laundry. "I'll need them back for work this week. Let me know if you need help sorting your clothes from mine." Her attempt at recreating our first date outfit, complete with the blue dress she knew I had always loved and the perfume she had worn that night 2 years ago, resulted in me complimenting her on looking nice for whatever plans you have tonight, before returning to my financial podcasts with the same enthusiasm I would show for a neighbor's dinner preparations. When she broke down crying about feeling lonely and disconnected, claiming that our friendship wasn't providing the emotional support she needed, I responded with the same helpful detachment I would offer to any friend experiencing relationship difficulties. "Have you considered joining some local hobby groups?" I suggested, pausing my podcast and giving her my full attention the way I would for any friend asking for advice. "There's a pottery collective downtown that might be good for networking, and I think the community center has social activities for people looking to expand their social circle. You might also want to consider getting a therapeutic pet if you're feeling isolated." The complete absence of jealousy, possessiveness, or any attempt to solve her loneliness by resuming our romantic relationship forced Amber to confront the reality that she had successfully eliminated every trace of romantic investment from our interaction. My suggestions were genuinely helpful and delivered with the caring tone of a good friend, but they contained no hint that I saw myself as the solution to her emotional needs or that I was affected by her distress in any personal way. When our downtown loft lease came up for renewal 4 months after Amber's declaration, I calmly announced over breakfast that I had purchased a one-bedroom condo in the financial district. With closing scheduled for the following month, the news hit her like a financial audit revealing catastrophic losses, her coffee mug freezing halfway to her lips as she processed what this meant for her housing situation. "You bought a place without telling me?" she asked, her voice climbing toward panic as the implications became clear. "Without even discussing it?" I looked up from the real estate documents I was reviewing, genuinely surprised by her reaction. I mentioned I was looking at condos a few weeks ago when you asked about my weekend plans. I didn't realize you needed updates on my personal financial decisions. The distinction was crucial. I had treated the condo purchase exactly like any major decision that friends might share with each other, mentioning it casually without seeking her input or approval because her opinion was no longer relevant to my housing choices. But what about our lease here? What about me? She asked, gesturing around the loft that we had shared for 2 years where she had assumed we would continue living indefinitely despite having redefined our relationship. Your name isn't on the lease, I replied, returning to my paperwork. I've already given the landlord notice that I won't be renewing. You'll need to decide whether you want to take over the lease yourself or find alternative housing. I can provide a reference if you need one for rental applications. Her frantic confession came tumbling out that evening after she had spent the day calculating rental costs and realizing that the loft's $3,000 monthly rent was completely beyond her pottery studio income. Tyler, I think I made a terrible mistake, she said, sitting across from me at our dining table while I organized my moving timeline spreadsheet. I've been thinking about what I said about my feelings, and I realize I was wrong. I do love you. I really do love you, and I want us to try again. I saved my spreadsheet and gave her my full attention the way I would for any friend experiencing a major life crisis. It sounds like you're dealing with a lot of stress right now, I replied with genuine concern. Major life transitions often make people reconsider past decisions. That's completely normal and understandable. The clinical tone of my response, treating her romantic revelation like a psychological phenomenon rather than a personal declaration, made her try a more direct approach. I'm saying I want to be with you romantically again. I want us to move to the new place together and go back to how things were. I considered her words carefully, applying the same analytical thinking I used for client consultations. I appreciate you sharing your feelings, but my capacity for romantic love requires mutual reciprocation from the beginning, I explained patiently. Since you clearly stated your limitations 6 months ago, I adapted permanently to respect your boundaries. Friendship is what you offered, and friendship is what we have. When she begged me to just give us another chance, I presented her with a detailed breakdown of utilities, rent deposits, and moving costs she would need to handle independently, along with a list of affordable apartments in her actual price range that I had researched during my lunch break. I want to make sure your transition goes smoothly, I said, handing her the folder of rental listings. I've highlighted the ones that allow pets in case you decide to get that therapeutic companion we discussed. The folder represented hours of research, genuine effort to help her succeed independently, and absolutely zero consideration of resuming our romantic relationship. She stared at the apartment listings like they were evidence of her complete failure to reclaim what she had voluntarily discarded, finally understanding that my friendship came with helpful practical support, but no emotional vulnerability or romantic investment. My final gesture on moving day involved presenting Amber with an elegant mahogany jewelry box that I had commissioned from a local craftsman, creating a moment of desperate hope that flickered across her face like candlelight before being extinguished by reality. "Tyler, what is this?" she asked, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the beautifully polished box, probably imagining that I was about to propose, or at least offer some romantic reconciliation that would restore her access to the life she had taken for granted. "Just a practical gift to help with your transition," I replied, watching her carefully open the hinged lid to reveal not an engagement ring, but keys to a property management company, office along with a lease agreement for a studio apartment I had already secured and paid first month's rent for as what I termed a friendship gesture. The studio was in a decent neighborhood within her budget, close to public transportation, and had good natural light for her pottery work. I had spent considerable time researching options that would support her success as an independent adult. "You found me an apartment?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she examined the lease documents with the same expression someone might wear while receiving a terminal diagnosis. "I wanted to ensure your smooth transition into independent living," I explained with the genuine care of a concerned friend helping someone navigate a difficult life change. "The studio has excellent lighting for your art, and the rent is well within your pottery income range. I've also included contact information for a few local pottery collectives that might help with networking and additional income opportunities." Her face cycled through confusion, gratitude, and crushing disappointment as she realized that I had systematically eliminated every trace of romantic dependency, infrastructure, and future planning from our relationship, while maintaining perfect adherence to her stated preferences for friendship-only interaction. The apartment represented thoughtful practical support delivered with the emotional distance of a social worker helping a client achieve housing stability. "This is really it then," she said, watching me load the last of my belongings into my new Tesla Model S, a purchase I had made without consulting her since friends don't make joint financial decisions or seek approval for major life choices. "You're really moving on completely." I paused in my packing to give her my full attention, recognizing that she was processing the finality of our changed relationship. "I moved on 6 months ago when you clarified your feelings," I replied with the patient tone I would use to explain basic financial concepts to a confused client. "I've been respecting your boundaries ever since, treating you exactly as you asked to be treated, as someone you have real feelings for, just not the love kind." The irony of her situation became crystal clear in that moment. She had successfully achieved exactly what she had requested: a relationship with someone who wasn't romantically invested in her emotional well-being, someone who treated her with friendly respect but no passionate attachment or future planning. As I drove away from the loft where we had lived together for 2 years, I reflected on the engagement ring that was now returned to the jeweler, the proposal speech I had been rehearsing, and the European honeymoon I had been secretly planning before her declaration of emotional limitations had saved me from making a catastrophic investment in someone who saw me as convenient rather than essential. The fund I had earmarked for our wedding was now financing my solo trip to Japan, where I planned to spend 3 weeks exploring financial markets, learning about investment strategies, and enjoying the company of people who appreciated my presence rather than merely tolerating it in exchange for lifestyle subsidies. 6 months later, mutual friends would tell me that Amber had moved back with her parents after struggling to maintain her independent lifestyle, that she frequently mentioned our relationship as the best thing she had ever lost, and that she had finally understood the difference between having someone who loved her and having someone who simply enjoyed her company while she happened to be around. Story 2. "Ma'am, please cooperate or we'll have to restrain you," the man in scrubs said firmly, his grip tightening on my arm. My heart pounded as I struggled against him, panic rising in my chest. "What is this? Why are you doing this to me?" I screamed, looking around frantically, searching for Nathaniel, for anyone who could explain what was happening. But all I saw were strangers, cold, expressionless faces dragging me out of my home like I was some kind of criminal. "My name is Charlotte Anderson, and I'm 32 years old. Up until a few weeks ago, I thought the worst thing that could ever happen to me was losing my father, Joshua Anderson, in a tragic plane crash. He was my rock, my hero, the only family I had left. But that morning, as I was forced into an unmarked van and taken to a place I didn't understand, I realized my nightmare had only just begun. My husband, Nathaniel, the man I trusted with my life, was nowhere to be found. The drive felt like it lasted forever, though I couldn't tell you exactly how long. My sense of time was warped by the panic coursing through my veins. I tried asking questions, begging for answers, but no one would speak to me. The van smelled sterile, like disinfectant, and the hum of the engine was the only sound. When we finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a tall, ominous building surrounded by a high fence. A chill ran down my spine as they led me inside, their hands gripping my arms like I might bolt at any second. The place felt wrong from the moment I stepped through the doors. The walls were an unwelcoming shade of beige, and the faint smell of cleaning chemicals mixed with something sour lingered in the air. People in white coats moved briskly through the halls, avoiding eye contact as if I didn't exist. I asked again, demanded really what this was about. "There's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice cracking. "You have the wrong person." But no one answered. Instead, they handed me a plain set of clothes and told me to change. As soon as I stepped inside, a tall man in a crisp white coat approached me, his expression unsettlingly calm. "Ms. Anderson, I'm Dr. Paul Reynolds," he said, extending a hand I couldn't bring myself to shake. "I'm the director here and I want to assure you that you're in a safe place." His voice was steady, almost soothing, but there was a coldness in his eyes that made my stomach churn. I didn't feel safe, not even close. "What is this place? Why am I here?" I demanded, my voice trembling. He sighed as if he'd dealt with this 100 times before. "I understand you're confused, but this is for your own good," he said, ignoring my question. "Your husband expressed deep concerns about your well-being following your father's passing. He's worried about you, Charlotte." My blood ran cold at the mention of Nathaniel. This wasn't concern. This was a betrayal. Not long ago, my life seemed perfect. I had a loving husband, a beautiful home, and the kind of life most people could only dream of. My father, Joshua Anderson, was my anchor, the man who had raised me single-handedly after my mom died when I was a little girl. He was my hero, my protector, and the one person who truly understood me. But everything came crashing down when his private jet went down without warning. One phone call was all it took to shatter my world. I remember the exact moment I got the call. I was in the middle of organizing a fundraiser for one of my father's charities when my phone buzzed. "Ms. Anderson, we're so sorry to inform you." The rest of the words blurred as my knees buckled and I sank into the nearest chair. A plane crash. No survivors. It felt unreal, like some cruel joke. My dad, my hero, was gone. Days later, at the funeral, I stood next to my husband as condolences from strangers poured in. The grief was overwhelming, but nothing prepared me for the aftermath. The cold, clinical reading of my father's will, where I learned I was the sole heir to everything he had built. The weight of the Anderson empire was now mine to carry, and I didn't even have time to process the loss before I was thrust into a world of boardrooms and financial decisions I never asked for. Days later at the funeral, I stood next to my husband, Nathaniel, and his mother, Martha, as condolences from strangers poured in. Martha gripped my hand tightly, her eyes brimming with what seemed like sympathy, but something about her touch felt off, too firm, too calculated. The grief was suffocating, a haze that dulled everything around me, but I tried to focus on my father's memory, as the man who built an empire and still managed to be my everything, but nothing prepared me for what came after, the cold, clinical reading of my father's will. Nathaniel sat beside me, offering quiet reassurance as the lawyer explained the details. "Charlotte, you are the sole heir to your father's estate," he said, his voice steady. "Everything, his shares in Anderson Steel, the properties, the investments, was mine." I remember glancing at Nathaniel, who gave me a small, supportive smile, and then at Martha, whose face was unreadable. The weight of the Anderson empire landed squarely on my shoulders, and I barely had time to process the loss before I was thrust into a world of boardrooms, legalities, and decisions I never asked for. Now I was sitting in a stark, cold room inside a mental institution, and I still didn't understand what was happening to me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were an empty, lifeless beige. My head was spinning with questions, but no answers were coming. I replayed Dr. Reynolds' words over and over in my mind. "This is for your own good. Your husband is deeply concerned about you." Concerned. Nathaniel had never mentioned anything about this, and how could he do this without even speaking to me? Every time I asked for an explanation, I was met with the same dismissive response. "It's all in your best interest." My best interest? Being locked away in this place. I wasn't even allowed to contact Nathaniel or anyone for that matter. They gave me some pills shortly after I arrived, something to help me relax. I tried refusing, but a nurse stood over me until I swallowed them. Not long after, everything became hazy. My body felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish. It was like they were trying to erase me, one pill at a time. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It wasn't the kind of peaceful quiet you find in a comforting space. It was hollow, eerie, and oppressive. I opened my eyes to see a stark white room with nothing but a narrow bed and a steel chair in the corner. The walls were completely bare, the kind of blankness that felt intentionally dehumanizing. For a moment, I thought I might be dreaming, but the stiffness in my body told me otherwise. My head throbbed, and my mouth was dry as if I hadn't had water in days. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt weak, like I'd been asleep for hours or maybe even days. The air smelled sterile, sharp with a faint chemical edge, and the faint hum of a distant machine was the only sound. Panic bubbled in my chest as I scanned the room for any sign of familiarity or explanation. There was nothing. No clock, no window, not even a mirror, just the emptiness. I called out weakly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice cracked, barely more than a whisper, and the only response was my own echo. The silence became unbearable. The more I sat there, the heavier the weight on my chest grew. Panic turned into anger, and before I knew it, I was on my feet, slamming my fists against the cold, unyielding walls. "Let me out!" I screamed, my voice breaking with each word. "What is this place? Someone tell me what's going on." My hands stung with every impact, but I didn't stop. The frustration, the confusion, the betrayal, it all boiled over until I was pounding on the door with everything I had. I didn't even hear the door open behind me. A nurse appeared, holding a syringe in one hand, her face blank, almost robotic. "Please calm down, Ms. Anderson," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I stumbled back, shaking my head, but before I could react, she grabbed my arm with surprising force and plunged the needle into it. "No, stop!" I shouted, but it was too late. The room began to spin, and my legs gave out beneath me. My last thought before everything went black was that this couldn't be real, this had to be some kind of nightmare. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze, though I only realized how much time had gone by when I overheard a nurse mentioning it to another staff member. I spent most of my days in a drugged stupor, barely aware of my surroundings. The medication dulled everything, my emotions, my thoughts, even the physical sensations of my own body. I couldn't muster the strength to ask questions anymore. The Charlotte I knew, the one who fought, who demanded answers, felt like a distant memory. I'd wake up briefly, eat the tasteless food they brought me, and then drift back into unconsciousness. My dreams were fragmented and strange, filled with distorted faces and muffled voices. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of Nathaniel in those dreams, but I couldn't tell if it was my mind playing tricks on me or if I was clinging to the last bit of hope I had left. Each time I woke I felt heavier, like I was sinking deeper into a void I couldn't escape. I wasn't living, I was just existing, and that terrified me more than anything. I stared at her for a moment, trying to gauge if she was serious or just messing with me. Her eyes didn't waver, and there was something about the way she held herself, calm but sharp, like she was always calculating. I was confused and wary, but what choice did I have? I was desperate, and for the first time in weeks someone had spoken to me like I was a person, not just another sedated patient. "What do you mean?" I whispered back, my voice hoarse from disuse. Lily leaned in closer, her voice barely audible. "This place isn't just for the mentally ill," she said, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "People end up here because someone wants them gone. You think you're the first." My stomach twisted at her words, but I didn't have time to process them before she sat back, acting like nothing had happened. "You can either trust me or you can stay here and rot," she said casually, stabbing her fork into a sad pile of carrots. Trouble or not, I knew one thing: she might be my only chance to get out of this hell. Later that day, during the brief free time they allowed us in the common area, Lily found me again. She sat down next to me, keeping her tone casual as if we were old friends chatting. "I've gotten out of here before, you know," she said, twirling a strand of her dark hair between her fingers. I glanced at her, trying to mask my surprise. "You've escaped?" I whispered, barely believing what I was hearing. She nodded, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. "A few times. It's not as hard as you think, but they always find me. The streets aren't exactly forgiving, and I stick out too much after a few days. They catch me, bring me back, drug me up for a while, and act like I never left." Her voice was steady, almost nonchalant, but I could see a flicker of frustration in her eyes. "But you," she added, looking straight at me, "you're different. You don't belong here, and you've got something they want to keep locked away. That makes you dangerous to them, and that means we have a better chance if we work together." Lily leaned in closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I got caught again the day before you arrived," she admitted, her smirk fading for the first time. "I was so close, but they picked me up a few streets over. Same routine, dragged me back here, pumped me full of meds, and threw me in isolation for a few days. But this time I've been watching, studying the new guards. They're not as sharp as the old ones." I raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "New guards?" I asked quietly, my voice trembling with both curiosity and fear. She nodded, her dark eyes glinting with determination. "Yeah, the night shifts especially. They're lazy, distracted. I've been mapping their routines during meals, free time, and lights out. I know when the hall cameras are watched and when they aren't." She glanced around the room, her gaze darting between the other patients and the staff. "If we do this right, they won't even see us coming." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't dared to feel: hope. Over the next few days, Lily and I quietly started piecing together a plan. She'd whisper to me during meals or in the common room when no one was close enough to overhear. Every detail mattered. What time the night shift guards switched, which doors were left unlocked for staff convenience, and the quickest route to the outer gate. "Timing is everything," Lily said one evening, her voice barely audible as she pretended to stir her bland soup. "If we get caught, it's game over. They'll double the meds and we'll never get another chance." We decided on 2 nights from then, during the dead hours when the staff was at its laziest. Lily would create a distraction near the nurses' station to pull their attention, while I slipped into the hallway with a stolen keycard she had managed to swipe during one of her earlier outings. Once the hall was clear, we'd meet at the back exit and slip out through a maintenance door she swore hadn't been locked in months. "It's risky," she said, her voice serious for the first time. "But it's the only shot we've got." I nodded, swallowing hard. Risky didn't even begin to cover it, but staying here wasn't an option. The night of the escape, my heart pounded so loudly I was sure it would give us away. Lily's timing was flawless. She managed to knock over a cart near the nurses' station, sending trays and equipment crashing to the floor. The noise echoed through the halls, drawing the attention of the guards like clockwork. I slipped out of the common room, clutching the stolen keycard so tightly it dug into my palm. My legs still felt weak from the medication, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Lily met me at the maintenance door, her face flushed but focused. We were halfway to the outer wall when the shout started. "Stop them, they're escaping." My chest tightened as I glanced back to see 2 guards sprinting toward us, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Panic surged through me, but Lily grabbed my arm and pointed ahead. "Go, the wall's just up there," she hissed. I didn't have time to think. I ran toward the towering barrier, every step burning as if my legs might give out. When I reached the wall, I clawed at the rough surface, forcing myself to climb even though my arms felt like lead. Behind me, I heard Lily yell, "Keep going, Charlotte, don't stop." My heart sank as I looked back and saw her standing firm, facing the guards. She grabbed a loose piece of wood from the ground and swung it wildly, buying me precious seconds. "Go," she screamed again. My breath caught as I reached the top of the wall, pulling myself over with every ounce of strength I had left. The last thing I saw before dropping to the other side was Lily, defiant to the end, as the guards closed in on her. I don't know how I managed to find the strength to climb that wall after so many days of being pumped full of heavy medication. My muscles ached, my head was spinning, and every movement felt like I was dragging my body through quicksand. But when you're fighting to survive, something primal kicks in. You find strength you didn't know you had, fueled by fear, desperation, and the sheer will to escape. My fingers clawed at the rough concrete, scraping and burning as I pulled myself up inch by inch. The sounds of Lily struggling with the guards echoed behind me, her shouts urging me on. My arms screamed in protest, my legs felt like they might give out any second. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With one final heave, I threw myself over the top and tumbled to the ground on the other side, the impact jarring but freeing. For the first time in weeks, I felt the cool night air on my skin. I was out, but my heart ached knowing Lily had stayed behind to make it happen. The next 2 days were a blur of fear and exhaustion. I didn't have a plan, no idea where to go or who to trust. The streets were cold and unforgiving, and every noise, every car horn, every passing stranger sent my heart racing. I kept to the shadows, ducking into alleys and abandoned buildings whenever I thought someone might be following me. I was terrified they'd find me, drag me back to that awful place, and lock me away for good. My body felt like it was running on fumes. The medication still lingered in my system, making me feel sluggish and disconnected, and the little food I found barely took the edge off the hunger gnawing at me. I barely slept, too afraid that someone would recognize me or report me to the authorities. The world outside was supposed to be freeing, but instead it felt like a cage of its own. My mind kept going back to Lily. Was she okay? Had she paid the price for helping me? The guilt was overwhelming, but I couldn't let it stop me. I had to keep moving. After 2 days of hiding on the streets, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed help, and the only person I could think of was Jonathan Sachs. But I wasn't stupid. I couldn't just announce myself. I'd managed to collect enough spare change by holding out an old coffee cup on a busy corner, avoiding eye contact with everyone who passed. Humiliation aside, it was enough to get me to a payphone. I dialed the Anderson Steel main number, my fingers shaking as I pressed each button. When the receptionist answered, her tone was clipped and professional. "Good morning, Anderson Steel. How may I direct your call?" I hesitated for a second before lying through my teeth. "Hi, this is Anna Collins," I said, trying to sound composed. "I'm a former colleague of Jonathan Sachs, and I need to speak with him right away." There was a pause, and my heart raced as I imagined her questioning my story. But then she said, "One moment, please," and the line clicked to hold. I let out a shaky breath, clinging to the faint hope that he'd actually pick up. When the line finally connected, I heard Jonathan's voice on the other end. It was steady and professional, just as I remembered from the few times I'd seen him with my father. "This is Jonathan Sachs," he said. I hesitated, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Jonathan," I started, my voice trembling. "It's me, Charlotte." There was a long pause, and I could hear the faint rustling of papers in the background. "Charlotte," he finally said, his tone a mix of disbelief and caution. "Where are you?" everyone thought. I cut him off before he could finish. "I can't tell you where I am," I said quickly, glancing over my shoulder as if someone might be watching. "But I need your help. I've been locked away in a mental institution, Jonathan. They drugged me. They said I was a danger to myself, but it's not true." My voice cracked, and I could feel the tears threatening to spill. "It was Nathaniel and his mother. They did this to me." When the line clicked and I heard Jonathan's voice, steady and professional, I took a deep breath to steady myself. "Jonathan," I said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. "It's me, Charlotte." There was a pause, and I could almost hear his confusion. "Charlotte, where have you been?" everyone thought. I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. "I can't explain over the phone. I need you to meet me alone." He hesitated, and I could hear the doubt creeping into his tone. "Charlotte, are you okay? What's going on?" I pushed through the knot in my throat. "Please, Jonathan, just meet me. And you have to swear to me you won't tell Nathaniel or Martha." Another pause, longer this time, before he finally said, "All right, where do you want to meet?" Jonathan arrived at the park just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the empty benches. I stayed hidden near a tree, watching him from a distance for a moment to make sure he was alone. When I finally stepped out, his face went pale. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low, almost disbelieving. "You look. God, what's happened to you?" I motioned for him to sit, too drained to respond right away. We settled on a bench far from the main path, the distant sounds of children playing barely registering in my ears. "They took everything from me," I began, my voice trembling as I tried to keep my composure. "Nathaniel and Martha, they're behind all of this. After my father died, they had me declared mentally unstable and had me locked in a facility. I've been drugged and trapped for weeks." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "And you know the worst part? They've disappeared. Not a word, not a visit, not even a trace. They threw me away like I was nothing, Jonathan. Nothing." Jonathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he tried to process everything I'd just told him. "Why would they do this to you?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "I mean Nathaniel. He loved you, didn't he? And Martha, why would she go to such extremes?" I shook my head, my hands gripping the edge of the bench so tightly my knuckles turned white. "That's what I need to find out," I said, my voice firmer now. "It's not just about the inheritance, at least I don't think it is. They wanted me out of the picture completely. But why? Why go this far?" I looked at him, hoping he'd understand the urgency in my eyes. "I need your help, Jonathan. You are close to my father and you know the business better than anyone. If anyone can help me figure this out, it's you." Jonathan sat back, letting out a slow breath as he processed what I'd told him. Then, without hesitation, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I believe you, Charlotte. And if what you're saying is true, we can't waste any time. You need a safe place, somewhere no one will think to look for you." He glanced around the park, scanning for any signs of prying eyes. "I have a small property outside the city, nothing fancy, just a quiet place I use when I need to get away. You can stay there while we figure this out." Relief washed over me, though it was mixed with exhaustion. I followed him to his car, keeping my head down as we left the park. The drive was quiet, Jonathan glancing at me every now and then, concern etched into his face. When we arrived, the property was exactly as he described, small, simple, and tucked away from prying eyes. "It's not much," he said as he opened the door and helped me inside. "But it's safe. I'll bring you food, clothes, whatever you need." I nodded, too drained to say much more, but his kindness felt like the first ray of hope I'd had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up feeling slightly better. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or hiding in the shadows. The small room Jonathan had prepared was modest but warm, a far cry from the cold, sterile walls of the asylum. I stretched gingerly, my body still aching from days of fear and exertion, but the clarity in my mind was something I hadn't felt in weeks. Jonathan arrived shortly after with a bag of groceries and a determined look on his face. "I've been thinking about everything you told me," he began as he set the bag down on the kitchen counter. "I contacted someone, an old friend who works as a private investigator. I told him what little I know and he's agreed to help. We need to figure out exactly what Nathaniel and Martha did, who they worked with, and why." His voice was steady, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "This isn't going to be easy, Charlotte, but if they've left a trail, we'll find it." For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Someone was finally on my side, and I wasn't going to let Nathaniel and Martha win. A week later, the door creaked open, and Jonathan stepped inside, his face grim but focused. Behind him followed a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a detective novel, tall, sharp-eyed, with an air of quiet authority. He carried a weathered leather briefcase in one hand and nodded politely at me as Jonathan introduced him. "Charlotte, this is David Harper. He's the private investigator I hired. David, this is Charlotte." David set his briefcase on the small kitchen table and opened it with practiced precision. "Ms. Anderson, I've spent the last week piecing together what happened to you," he began, pulling out a thick stack of documents, photos, and handwritten notes. "It's worse than we initially thought, and frankly, it's astonishing how far they went to cover their tracks." He laid out the first set of papers, official-looking forms with signatures and seals. "This," he said, pointing to a medical report, "is a fraudulent psychiatric evaluation. Nathaniel and Martha hired a psychiatrist, Dr. Evelyn Marks, to fabricate this report. It states that you were a danger to yourself following your father's death and that you needed immediate psychiatric intervention." I stared at the document, my stomach turning. But how could they make that stick? I was fine. Grieving, but fine. David nodded grimly. "They knew grief alone wouldn't hold up, so they exaggerated your behavior. Claims of paranoia, erratic mood swings, even self-harm, none of which were corroborated. That report was the foundation for what came next." He slid another paper forward. "This is the expedited court order, signed by Judge Leonard Grayson, a name that appears on several questionable cases I've investigated before. He was bribed to fast-track the order, bypassing the usual scrutiny." Jonathan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his face growing darker with every word. David continued, pulling out another set of documents. "Once the court order was signed, it was sent directly to the facility where you were admitted. The owners of that institution, Dr. Paul Reynolds and his partners, are known for accepting high-profile patients with special circumstances. They've been under the radar for years, taking bribes to keep people out of sight and under control." He placed a photo of Reynolds and Nathaniel shaking hands at what appeared to be a private meeting. "This was taken 3 days before your commitment." My breath caught and my hands trembled as I reached for the photo. "Nathaniel, he planned this. They both planned this, I whispered, my voice barely audible. David nodded again. Not only did they plan it, but they also ensured you'd stay heavily medicated, reducing your chances of reaching out or appearing coherent if anyone visited. He tapped another paper, a ledger showing payments. Here's the money trail. Nathaniel transferred $250,000 to Dr. Reynolds the day after you were admitted. That payment bought your silence. I felt like I couldn't breathe, the room spinning as the weight of their betrayal hit me. And Martha? I asked, my voice raw. David's expression hardened. She was instrumental. Communications between her and Nathaniel show that she pushed for this. She convinced him it was the only way to secure your inheritance. Without you in the picture, they'd gain full control of the Anderson estate. He pulled out one last piece of evidence, a series of emails between Nathaniel, Martha, and Dr. Marks. They discussed everything in chilling detail, fabricating the report, bribing the judge, and ensuring I'd be kept sedated indefinitely. They were thorough, David admitted, but they underestimated two things. One, your resilience, and two, my team's ability to dig through the mess they left behind. Jonathan, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Charlotte, this is enough to take them down. With this evidence, we can not only expose what they've done, but ensure they're held accountable. His voice was firm, but I could see the anger simmering beneath. I looked at the spread of evidence before me, proof of the lengths they'd gone to strip me of my freedom, my sanity, and my life. My fear began to give way to something stronger, something that had been building since the day I escaped. Determination. They thought they could destroy me, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. But they're going to learn just how wrong they were. When Jonathan and David left, the house fell silent again, leaving me alone with the weight of everything I'd just learned. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence, the damning proof of what Nathaniel and Martha had done to me. My hands trembled as I traced the edges of one of the photos, a snapshot of Nathaniel shaking hands with that awful doctor, Paul Reynolds. It felt surreal, like I was looking at a stranger instead of the man I once loved with all my heart. Nathaniel. His name echoed in my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. How could someone I trusted so deeply, someone who had held me during my darkest moments after my father's death, do something so brutal? The memories of us together came flooding back, the laughter we shared, the promises we made, the way he looked at me as if I were his whole world. Was any of it real? Or was it all just part of some long con orchestrated by his manipulative mother? I pressed my hands to my face, the tears finally spilling over. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the cruel, calculated way they'd stripped me of my life, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle to be removed. The next morning, Jonathan arrived at the small property earlier than usual, his face tense but energized. "Charlotte," he said, motioning for me to sit with him at the table. "David and I spoke with the authorities last night. After reviewing the evidence, they've confirmed we have a strong case, strong enough to take Nathaniel and Martha into custody immediately." I blinked at him, the words almost too overwhelming to process. "So, it's happening?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded firmly. "Yes, they've issued warrants for both of them, Nathaniel and Martha. The authorities are coordinating to ensure they're apprehended simultaneously. It'll be discreet but swift." Relief and anxiety flooded me all at once, relief that justice might finally be within reach, but anxiety at the thought of facing the fallout. "What happens to them now?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. Jonathan leaned forward, his tone reassuring. "They'll be taken in for questioning first. Once in custody, the evidence we've gathered will speak for itself." Jonathan glanced at me as he stood to leave. "By the way," he said, his tone calm but firm, "they already have officers watching the mansion. If Nathaniel or Martha try to run, they'll be caught before they get anywhere." After Jonathan left, I stared at the phone for what felt like hours, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Finally, I couldn't hold back any longer. With trembling hands, I dialed Nathaniel's number. The line rang twice before he picked up. "It's over, Nathaniel," I said, my tone sharper than I expected. There was a beat of silence on the other end before he replied. "Charlotte, oh my God, is it really you? I've been so worried about you. Where are you? Are you okay?" "Cut the act, Nathaniel," I said sharply, my voice like steel. "I didn't call to hear your lies. I know everything." There was a beat of silence on the other end before he spoke again, this time more cautiously. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone measured but tinged with nervousness. "Where have you been? People have been looking for you. I was worried sick." "Worried?" I scoffed, gripping the phone tighter. "You mean worried I'd escape? Worried I'd find out about the lies you and your mother spun to have me locked away?" I didn't let him interrupt. "Save it, Nathaniel. I know about the fake diagnosis, the bribes, the payments to keep me drugged and out of the way. It's over." Nathaniel hesitated, his voice faltering slightly. "Charlotte, I don't know where you're getting this from, but you've been through so much lately. Maybe you're confused. Don't you dare patronize me," I snapped, cutting him off. "You think I don't know what you've done?" "I have the proof, Nathaniel. The bribes, the documents, the payments to the clinic, it's all out in the open now. You and Martha thought you could bury me, but you underestimated me." Nathaniel was quiet for a moment, and I could hear his shaky breath on the other end of the line. "Charlotte, I didn't know what else to do," he finally stammered, his voice breaking slightly. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. Martha said it was for your own good. She said you were. You were spiraling after your father died. I thought we were helping you." "Helping me?" I said, my voice rising with disbelief. "Do you even hear yourself, Nathaniel? You drugged me, locked me away, and stripped me of my life. You didn't help me, you tried to erase me." "I didn't want to erase you," he snapped suddenly, the facade cracking. I didn't want to lose everything. Martha said if you were declared unfit, we could take control of the estate until you recovered. I thought it was temporary, I thought. "You thought I'd what? Thank you for ruining my life?" I interrupted, my fury bubbling over. "Be honest, Nathaniel. You never intended to give anything back. This wasn't about helping me. This was about greed. Admit it." "No," he shouted, his voice desperate now. "I loved you, Charlotte. I still do. I swear to God I never wanted to hurt you. Martha. She made it sound like the only way. She kept pushing and pushing, and I was weak, okay? I listened to her because I thought it was what I had to do. Stop hiding behind her," I yelled, my chest heaving with anger. "You signed those papers, Nathaniel. You made the payments. You stood by while they drugged me and let me rot in that place. Don't you dare try to make this about her. Take responsibility for once in your life." "I didn't know it would get that bad," he shouted back, his voice breaking completely. I thought it would be easy, that you'd be out of the way for a little while, and then we could figure it out later. I didn't know they'd keep you drugged like that. I didn't know you'd." His voice trailed off, the weight of his guilt sinking in. "You didn't know," I said bitterly, my tone dripping with contempt. "You didn't want to know. You closed your eyes and let her manipulate you because it was easier than standing up for what was right. And now you're going to pay for it." Nathaniel's voice was barely a whisper now. "Charlotte, I swear, I'll make it right. I'll tell them everything. I'll go to the authorities, just please believe me. I never stopped loving you, loving me." I repeated, my voice cold. "If this is what your love looks like, I don't want it. You and Martha destroyed everything, Nathaniel. There's no fixing this." For a moment the line was silent except for his shaky breathing. "Charlotte," he said finally, his voice broken, "I'm sorry. I don't know what else to say." "You can say it to the police," I said flatly. And before he could respond, I hung up. My hand hovered over the receiver for a moment before I let out a shaky breath. It wasn't closure, but it was enough for now. The next morning, I stood across the street from the mansion I once called home, watching as the police swarmed the property. The flashing lights of their vehicles reflected off the windows, casting an almost surreal glow over the scene. My heart pounded as I watched officers march up the front steps, their knock on the door firm and commanding. Moments later, the door opened, and there they were, Nathaniel and Martha. Nathaniel's face was pale, his usual composure completely shattered. As the officers cuffed his hands behind his back, he looked around wildly, his eyes searching the crowd that had gathered. When his gaze landed on me, his entire body tensed. "Charlotte," he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "Charlotte, please, let me explain." He tried to step toward me, but the officers restrained him, pulling him back. I didn't move, I didn't blink. I just stared at him, my face a mask of cold indifference. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction, not anymore. His pleas grew more frantic as the officers led him toward one of the waiting cars. "Charlotte, I love you, please, don't do this." His voice faded as they forced him into the back seat. Martha, on the other hand, was the picture of defiance. She held her head high, her expression unreadable as they cuffed her hands. She didn't say a word, didn't even glance in my direction. Her pride was unshakable, even now. It didn't matter. Her silence spoke volumes, and her arrogance would crumble soon enough. As the police cars pulled away, taking them to face the consequences of their actions, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, and something else I couldn't quite name. I turned and walked away, not looking back. They had tried to erase me, to destroy everything I was, but they hadn't won. I was still standing, and finally I felt like I could breathe again. It helps us a lot, and make sure you won't miss out on more great stories we share here. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Story 3. I'm Morgan, 29, a restaurant consultant who built my career from nothing. Tonight should have been simple. Just dinner at Lumiere, the fanciest restaurant in town, for my mother-in-law Diane's anniversary. But when I arrived, something was off. The table was full, every seat taken, and Diane's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "No place for me." "Oh dear," she said with a smirk, "maybe a budget place suits you better." I felt my cheeks burn, then remembered exactly who I was. I burst out laughing. If you're enjoying family drama, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground when family tries to put you down. My relationship with Diane was troubled from the moment I met her son Ethan during our sophomore year of college. We were taking the same business course, paired for a semester-long project. I was there on a partial scholarship, working 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest. Ethan, on the other hand, drove a BMW his parents had gifted him for his 18th birthday and lived in an off-campus apartment they paid for. None of that mattered to me. What caught my attention was his kindness, how he offered to study with struggling classmates, how he volunteered at the campus food pantry, and how he never once made me feel less than when I had to reschedule our project meetings around my work hours. He was nothing like the entitled rich kid I'd initially assumed him to be. We fell in love gradually over coffee-fueled study sessions and late-night conversations about our dreams. I wanted to revolutionize struggling restaurants, having grown up helping at my aunt's diner that eventually closed due to competition from chains. Ethan wanted to use his family's wealth and connections in more meaningful ways than just accumulating more wealth. The first time Ethan mentioned meeting his parents, I was nervous, but excited. "They'll love you," he assured me, squeezing my hand. How could they not? Diane Preston lived in a world of country club memberships, charity galas, and social hierarchies. Their home was a sprawling colonial with manicured gardens and a 3-car garage housing vehicles worth more than my entire childhood home. When Ethan introduced me, Diane's smile never reached her eyes. "Morgan, that's an interesting name for a girl," she said, looking me over like I was a specimen under a microscope. "And what does your father do?" "He's a mechanic," I answered proudly, "has his own shop now, but he started as an apprentice right out of high school." The slight narrowing of her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She peppered me with questions designed to highlight our class differences, where I summered as a child nowhere. We couldn't afford vacations. What clubs I belonged to? None, unless you counted the debate team where I planned to intern. Wherever would hire me and work around my other jobs. Ethan noticed none of it, or if he did, he didn't recognize the subtle put-downs. His father Harold was kinder, asking genuine questions about my studies and seeming impressed by my work ethic. But Diane had made her assessment. I wasn't good enough for her son. Over the next few years, as Ethan and I grew closer, Diane's tactics evolved. She'd forget to invite me to family events, then act surprised when Ethan brought me anyway. She'd make comments about how refreshing it was that I wasn't concerned with appearances, right after I'd made an effort to dress nicely. She'd suggest career paths that would take Ethan far from our city and from me. After graduation, I secured a position at a restaurant consulting firm, starting at the bottom but quickly proving my value. I understood both the business side and the service side of restaurants in a way my more privileged colleagues couldn't. By 27, I was handling major accounts independently, traveling to help struggling establishments reinvent themselves, find their unique value, and become profitable again. Ethan and I married when we were 26, despite Diane's suggestion that we were rushing things. The wedding was smaller than what she'd wanted for her only son, but it was perfect for us. Ethan had joined his father's investment firm, but focused on supporting small businesses and ethical startups. We bought a modest but lovely home, determined to make our own way rather than relying on his family's money. Diane never missed an opportunity to remind me of my background. At every family gathering, she'd find ways to mention her club friends, her luxury vacations, her connections to prominent families, all while giving me those looks that said, "This is a world you'll never truly belong in." Ethan would sometimes notice and try to redirect the conversation, but more often, he'd miss the subtext entirely. "Mom's just being mom," he'd say when I'd point out her behavior later. "She doesn't mean anything by it." It was our only real source of conflict, his inability or unwillingness to see how his mother treated me. Last month, Harold had called to invite us to their anniversary celebration at Lumiere, the most exclusive restaurant in the city, with a 6-month waiting list for reservations. I'd actually done some consulting work for them recently, helping them update their service model and refine their menu offerings, but I'd never mentioned this to Diane or Harold. It wasn't about keeping secrets. It just never came up, and I didn't want to seem like I was bragging. "We'd love to come." I told Harold, genuinely looking forward to experiencing the restaurant as a guest rather than a consultant. A week before the dinner, Ethan received an emergency call from his biggest client. They needed him in Chicago immediately for what would likely be several days. "You should still go to the dinner," he insisted as he packed. "Dad went to a lot of trouble to get that reservation, and they're expecting us." "Are you sure? You know how your mom can be when you're not around to buffer." "It'll be fine," he promised, kissing me goodbye. Maybe this is a chance for you, too, to bond a little. I'd spend hours getting ready for the dinner, choosing a sophisticated black dress that I'd splurged on for professional events, arranging my hair in an elegant updo, applying makeup that was polished but not overdone. I wanted to fit in to show Diane that I could navigate her world with grace. As I pulled up to the restaurant, I took a deep breath. Just one evening, I told myself. You can handle Diane for one evening, if only I'd known what she had planned. Lumiere occupied the top floor of one of the city's most historic buildings, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the skyline. The elevator opened directly into the restaurant, where a tuxedoed host stood behind an elegant podium crafted from a single piece of walnut. "Good evening, madam. Do you have a reservation?" He asked with perfect professionalism. "I'm with the Preston party," I replied. For Harold and Diane's anniversary dinner, recognition flickered in his eyes. "Ah, yes, right this way." As I followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, I admired the understated luxury, the hand-blown glass light fixtures, the original artwork on the walls, the immaculate table settings. Each table was positioned to create an intimate atmosphere while still offering stellar views. The soft murmur of conversation and the occasional clink of fine crystal created a sophisticated soundtrack. I spotted the Preston table before we reached it. Harold and Diane, Ethan's sister Rachel and her husband Colin, Harold's brother William and his wife Margaret, and two couples I recognized as longtime friends of the family. They were seated at one of the best tables in the house near the windows with an unobstructed view of the city lights. Harold saw me first and stood with a warm smile. "Morgan, glad you could make it." Everyone turned to look at me and I immediately noticed something was wrong. The table was set for exactly 10 people and all 10 seats were occupied. "Morgan," Diane said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I wasn't expecting you." I looked around the table in confusion. Harold invited us weeks ago. Ethan had to go to Chicago for work, but he insisted I should still come. "Oh dear," Diane replied, touching her pearl necklace. "When Ethan called to say he couldn't make it, I naturally assumed you wouldn't be coming either. I mean, it is our family celebration." She emphasized the word family ever so slightly. "I gave your spot to the Andersons." She continued gesturing to a couple I didn't recognize. "They're just back from Europe and we had so much to catch up on. I didn't think you'd mind, especially without Ethan here." The table had gone uncomfortably quiet. Rachel looked down at her plate, clearly embarrassed. Harold's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm sure we can squeeze in another chair," he suggested, starting to look around for a server. "Oh, I don't think that would work." Diane cut in smoothly. "We're at a complete table as it is, and you know how strict Lumiere is about their seating arrangements. Fire codes and all that." She gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe another time, dear. The heat of embarrassment crept up my neck. Everyone was watching now, waiting to see how I'd react. I caught Rachel's husband Colin hiding a smirk behind his wine glass. Perhaps a more budget-friendly place would suit you better tonight, Diane suggested. Her voice sweet, but her eyes cold. There's a charming little bistro just down the street that I hear is quite accessible. The implication was clear. Lumiere was for people like them, not people like me. In that moment, I felt like the scholarship girl again, the mechanic's daughter who didn't belong in their world of privilege and prestige. I thought of all the times Diane had subtly excluded me, all the little comments and oversights designed to remind me of my place. This was just the most blatant example yet. I see, I said quietly, fighting to keep my voice steady. Harold at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. Diane, surely we can. It's really fine, she interrupted. Morgan understands, don't you, dear? These things happen. I stood there, painfully aware of every second that passed, of the pitying looks from some and the barely concealed satisfaction from others. I thought about simply leaving, about calling Ethan in tears from the car, about never subjecting myself to Diane's cruelty again. I remembered something similar happening at Christmas 2 years ago when Diane had accidentally excluded me from the family photo, and at Rachel's baby shower last year, when my invitation mysteriously got lost in the mail, until Ethan specifically asked why I hadn't RSVP'd. This was different, though. This was public, deliberate humiliation. This was Diane showing me once and for all that I didn't belong at her table, literally and figuratively. I could feel tears threatening, my throat tightening with the effort of holding them back. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I wouldn't. And then something shifted inside me. A memory surfaced. One that changed everything about the situation. As I stood there, processing my mother-in-law's calculated exclusion, my mind flashed back to 6 months earlier. I'd been called in to consult for a struggling high-end restaurant that had recently changed ownership. Their reservations had dropped by 30% and reviews were becoming increasingly critical. That restaurant was Lumiere. James Bennett, the new owner and executive chef, had been desperate when my firm connected us. He'd invested his life savings and taken on significant debt to purchase what had once been the city's premier dining establishment, only to watch it falter under his stewardship. I don't understand. He told me during our first meeting in this very dining room. I trained in Paris. My technical skills are impeccable. Why aren't people coming? I'd spent 3 weeks at Lumiere observing operations, interviewing staff, analyzing customer feedback and reviewing their financials. The problems were subtle but significant. The menu had become predictable, the service overly formal and cold, the wine list overpriced and uninspired. Most importantly, James had been trying to replicate his predecessor's vision rather than establishing his own. You're not connecting with your customers. I'd explained during our final presentation. They're not experiencing your passion or your story. They're getting technically perfect food in a beautiful setting, but they're not getting you. Together, we'd revamped everything from the menu descriptions to the server training protocols. We'd adjusted the lighting, updated the music selection, and created signature dishes that showcase James's unique background and vision. I'd even helped him create relationships with local farmers and artisans to source unique ingredients that told a story. Within 2 months, reservations had increased by 40%. By 4 months, they were booked solid for 6 months in advance, and James's signature seafood dish had been featured in a national culinary magazine. We developed a friendship through the process. James had even invited me back several times to taste new menu items and give feedback. The last time I'd been here, just 3 weeks ago, he'd insisted on naming a cocktail after me, the Morgan, a sophisticated blend of bourbon, bitters, and house-made cherry syrup that perfectly balanced sweetness and strength. And now here I was, being told by my mother-in-law that I didn't belong in this very restaurant. A slow smile spread across my face as the absurdity of the situation hit me. Diane had no idea about my connection to Lumiere. She'd chosen this venue specifically to highlight the difference in our worlds, never imagining that I had played a crucial role in making it what it was today. I could have simply left, as she clearly expected me to do. I could have called Ethan and created a family conflict. Instead, I made a different choice. "Excuse me for a moment," I said calmly, turning away from the table before anyone could respond. I walked directly to the host stand where the Maitre d' Michael was reviewing reservations. He looked up as I approached, recognition immediately lighting his face. "Ms. Wells, what a pleasure to see you again. Are you here to meet with Chef James?" "Actually, Michael, I'm here for the Preston anniversary dinner, but there seems to be a misunderstanding about the seating. Is James available by any chance?" "Of course. He's in the kitchen, but I'll get him right away for you." As Michael disappeared through the swinging doors to the kitchen, I glanced back at the Preston table. Diane was watching me with narrowed eyes, probably wondering why I hadn't slunk away in embarrassment as planned. The others had returned to their conversations, likely assuming I was arranging for a ride home or perhaps securing a table for one somewhere else. Less than a minute later, the kitchen doors burst open and James emerged, his chef's coat impeccable despite the dinner rush. At 40, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines around his eyes, he had the confident bearing of someone who had found his calling. "Morgan," he exclaimed, loud enough for nearby tables to turn and look. He embraced me warmly, unconcerned about formality. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming in tonight? I would have prepared something special." From the corner of my eye, I could see Diane's jaw drop. Harold looked confused. The rest of the table had gone silent again, all eyes on me and the owner of the most exclusive restaurant in the city as he greeted me like an old friend. "It was meant to be a surprise," I explained, gesturing subtly toward the Preston table. "I'm actually here for my in-law's anniversary dinner, but there seems to have been a mix-up with the seating." James's eyes followed my gesture, taking in the scene and quickly assessing the situation. Something in my expression must have communicated more than my words because understanding dawned in his eyes. "A mix-up? At my restaurant? That's unacceptable." He turned to Michael. "Prepare table 12 immediately from his wells." Table 12, the chef's table. The best seat in the house, positioned to overlook both the city and the open kitchen, usually reserved weeks in advance for visiting celebrities or culinary critics. "James, that's not necessary," I started. "I insist," he said firmly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Nothing but the best for the woman who saved Lumiere." As James led me across the dining room, I could feel every eye on us, especially those from the Preston table. My mother-in-law's perfect plan was unraveling spectacularly, and I couldn't help the satisfaction that bloomed in my chest. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected ways. "Save Lumiere? Isn't that a bit dramatic?" I murmured to James as he personally escorted me to table 12, his hand lightly guiding my elbow. "Not in the slightest," he replied, pulling out my chair. "Without your help, I'd likely be back to working as a sous chef somewhere, drowning in debt from a failed investment. You transformed this place, Morgan." The table was being rapidly prepared by two servers who seemed to materialize out of nowhere. A crisp white tablecloth was spread, elegant place settings arranged, a small vase of fresh flowers placed just so. "Tonight, you're my honored guest," James continued. "I'll have the kitchen prepare a special tasting menu for you, on the house, of course." "James, that's really not—" "I won't hear any arguments," he said with a wink. "Michael will take care of you. I need to get back to the kitchen, but I'll come check on you later." As James returned to the kitchen, I caught sight of the Preston table. They were all staring, some with confusion, others with surprise, and Diane with barely concealed fury. The perfect seating arrangement for her anniversary dinner had been upstaged by her unwanted daughter-in-law being treated like royalty. Michael appeared at my side. "Chef has instructed me to offer you anything from our wine cellar. Perhaps the Chateau Margaux 2010. I believe it was your recommendation that we add it to our list." "That would be lovely, thank you, Michael." As I settled in, I saw Harold rise from his seat and approach my table. His expression was a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Morgan," he said, looking around at my premium placement. "What's going on? How do you know the owner?" I smiled. "I consulted for Lumiere 6 months ago when James took over. The restaurant was struggling and I helped him turn things around." Harold's eyebrows shot up. "You did? I had no idea." Diane was telling everyone how impossible it was to get her reservation here, how she had to call in favors from the Whitmores. "Is everything all right, Mr. Preston?" Michael had returned with my wine. Yes, I was just speaking with my daughter-in-law. Harold replied, still looking bewildered. Ms. Wells is highly respected here. Michael said as he decanted my wine with expert precision. Chef credits her with Lumiere's current success. Harold looked at me with new eyes. I see. He hesitated, then added, would you like to join us back at our table? I'm sure we can make room. That's very kind. Harold, but Chef has arranged a special menu for me here. Please go enjoy your anniversary dinner. We can catch up later. After Harold returned to his table, I saw him speaking intently to Diane, whose face had turned angry. He had an interesting shade of red. The other guests were stealing glances in my direction, whispering among themselves. The first course arrived. A delicate amuse-bouche that wasn't on the regular menu, accompanied by a note card in James's handwriting, for the woman who taught me to tell my story through food. As I savored the exquisite flavors, Rachel approached my table next, looking sheepish. Mom said you weren't coming, she said, without preamble. If I'd known she was pulling one of her stunts. It's fine, Rachel, I said, though we both knew it wasn't. No, it's not. She's been doing this kind of thing to you for years, and none of us have really stood up to her about it. She glanced back at their table. Colin thought it was funny at first, but even he's uncomfortable now. Mom's embarrassing herself. Would you like to join me? I offered, surprising myself. Rachel and I had never been close, largely due to her loyalty to Deanne. She looked tempted but shook her head. Better not, but maybe we could have lunch sometime, just us. I'd like that. Throughout my meal, I noticed a shift in the dynamics of the Preston table. Harold was uncharacteristically quiet. The Andersons, the couple who had taken my seat, looked uncomfortable. William and Margaret were speaking to Diane in what appeared to be hushed but stern tones. By the time my main course arrived, James had emerged from the kitchen again to check on me. Everything to your satisfaction, he asked, though he knew his team never served anything less than perfection. It's extraordinary, James. Thank you for this. The pleasure is mine. I'm testing some new dishes for the spring menu. I'd value your opinion when you have time. I'd be happy to help. I was aware of Diane watching this exchange, her lips pressed into a thin line. The power dynamic had shifted dramatically. In her carefully curated world, I was the outsider, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who had somehow ensnared her son. But here, in this temple to culinary excellence that she had chosen specifically to exclude me, I was the insider, respected, valued, even revered. As the evening progressed, I noticed Diane becoming increasingly agitated. Her anniversary dinner, meant to showcase her social standing and simultaneously put me in my place, had backfired spectacularly. Instead of being the queen holding court, she was just another customer, while I was receiving special treatment from the owner himself. It all came to a head when the dessert course arrived at both our tables. Mine was an exquisite creation, not on the regular menu, a delicate chocolate structure with gold leaf and house-made ice cream. The Preston table received the standard dessert offering, elegant but not personalized. That's when Diane finally snapped. This is ridiculous. Diane's voice cut through the refined atmosphere of Lumiere like a discordant note at a symphony. She had risen from her seat and was now storming toward my table, her anniversary dinner forgotten. Heads turned throughout the restaurant. The soft murmur of conversation dimmed as diners paused to watch the unfolding drama. Diane, Harold called after her, his tone warning, but she ignored him. She stopped at my table, her perfectly manicured hands gripping the back of the empty chair across from me. What did you do? Pull strings? Use Ethan's name to get special treatment. I set down my dessert fork calmly. Good evening, Diane. Would you like to join me? Don't play innocent, she hissed, lowering her voice but not her intensity. You planned this, didn't you? You knew I didn't include you in the reservation, so you came anyway and arranged this whole spectacle to embarrass me. I took a slow sip of water, giving myself a moment to control my response. Actually, I came because Harold invited us weeks ago, and Ethan insisted I should still attend even after his work emergency. I had no idea you'd removed me from the reservation. Then how do you explain all this? She gestured wildly at my table, the special dishes, the premium wine, the owner treating you like royalty. I believe I can answer that, came James' voice as he approached, alerted by the commotion. He extended his hand to Diane. James Bennett, owner and executive chef of Lumiere, You must be Morgan's mother-in-law. She's mentioned you." Diane reluctantly shook his hand, thrown off balance by his intervention. "Yes, I'm Diane Preston. We're celebrating our anniversary tonight." She attempted to regain her composure, switching to the charming socialite persona she presented to those she deemed important. "Your restaurant is exquisite." "Thank you," James replied with professional courtesy. "And thank you for being family to Morgan. She's quite extraordinary, isn't she? Lumiere wouldn't be what it is today without her expertise." Diane's smile froze. Her expertise, of course. "When I purchased this restaurant last year, it was hemorrhaging money and reputation. Morgan revolutionized everything from our menu development to our service protocols. That cocktail you're drinking, she helped create it. The seasonal tasting menu, her concept. She even connected us with the local farmers who supply our produce." With each word from James, Diane's carefully constructed narrative about me crumbled further. The other Preston dinner guests had now gathered nearby, drawn by the confrontation, but staying to hear revelations about the daughter-in-law they'd been conditioned to view as an outsider. "I had no idea," Harold said, looking at me with newfound respect. "Morgan, why didn't you tell us you worked with Lumiere?" I shrugged. "It was just another client. I didn't want to seem like I was bragging." "Just another client," James echoed incredulously. "Morgan, you transformed this place. We've been written up in every major food publication in the country since implementing your recommendations." The ripple of whispers among the gathered family members was almost comical. Rachel was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. William and Margaret exchanged meaningful glances. The Andersons looked like they wished they could disappear. Diane remained frozen, her social mask slipping to reveal the calculation beneath. I could almost see her rewiring her understanding of who I was, who we were in relation to each other. "Well, she finally managed. How interesting. I suppose your background in food service came in handy after all." It was a last desperate attempt to maintain her narrative, to reframe my professional success as something quaint, something still beneath her. Something in me finally snapped. Years of subtle put-downs, exclusions, and condescension crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stood slowly, making sure I was at eye level with her. "My background," I said quietly but firmly, "is in business strategy, market analysis, and operational efficiency. I have a master's degree in hospitality management from Cornell. I've saved dozens of restaurants across the country from bankruptcy. I've been profiled in Business Weekly and named one of the top consultants in my field." I took a step closer to her. "But you've never bothered to ask about my career. Have you, Diane? You decided who I was the moment you learned my father was a mechanic. You decided I wasn't good enough for Ethan, for your family, for your world." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had paused to watch. "That's not true," Diane protested weakly. "I've always been welcoming." "You've been anything but welcoming," Harold interrupted, surprising everyone. "Morgan's right, Diane. You've treated her poorly from day one. I noticed, but I didn't say anything. That was wrong of me." Diane turned to her husband, betrayal written across her features. "Harold, it's time for some honesty." "Diane," he continued firmly. "Tonight was supposed to be about celebrating our 30 years together, but instead, you used it as another opportunity to exclude and embarrass Morgan. That's not the woman I married. That's not who we are." Diane's face flushed crimson. She looked around at the circle of family members, searching for an ally and finding none. Even her loyal daughter Rachel was looking at her with disappointment. "I think," William said into the uncomfortable silence, "that an apology is in order." All eyes turned to Diane. The perfect anniversary dinner she had planned was now thoroughly derailed. Her social standing in this exclusive restaurant compromised, her family united against her behavior. "I may have been hasty in my assumptions," she managed, each word clearly costing her. "If I've made you feel unwelcome, Morgan, that wasn't my intention." It wasn't a real apology. We all knew that, but it was as close as Diane Preston had ever come to admitting she was wrong. "Thank you, Diane," I replied with as much grace as I could muster. "I appreciate that." An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. James, sensing the tension, stepped in smoothly. "Mrs. Preston, while your table is being cleared, perhaps you and your guests would enjoy coffee and digestives in our private lounge. On the house, of course, for your anniversary." Diane seized the lifeline, eager for an escape from the public humiliation. That would be lovely, thank you. As the group began to disperse, Harold lingered behind. Morgan, would you join us? I shook my head. I think I'll finish my dessert and head home. It's been quite an evening. Harold nodded in understanding. I owe you an apology too. I've known how Diane treats you, and I've let it go on too long. That changes tonight. After they left for the lounge, James returned to my table. Well, that was dramatic, he said, sitting down across from me. Are you okay? Surprisingly, yes, I replied, realizing it was true. It's been a long time coming, actually. Family dynamics are complicated, he said wisely. My mother-in-law hated me for the first 5 years. Thought I wasn't stable enough as a chef to marry her daughter. What changed? He grinned. I got a Michelin star. Suddenly I was acceptable. I laughed. So all I needed was a restaurant revolution to earn my mother-in-law's respect. Sometimes people only understand success in terms they recognize, he said with a shrug. Speaking of which, that offer to consult on our spring menu was serious. When you have time, as I finished my dessert in peace, I realized that something fundamental had shifted tonight. The careful power structure Diane had maintained for years had been irreversibly altered. It wasn't just about her learning of my professional success. It was about others in the family finally seeing her behavior for what it was. When I finally left Lumiere that night, I felt lighter somehow. The truth, even when it arrives through conflict, has a way of clearing the air. The morning after the dinner debacle, my phone began chiming with notifications before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. It started with a text from Rachel. That was wild last night. Mom's still in shock. Lunch next week, my treat. Then came an email from Harold, formal as always. Morgan, I want to reiterate my apology for last night's unfortunate situation. Diane and I would appreciate a chance to speak with you and Ethan when he returns. Please let us know when might be convenient. William's wife Margaret, who had always been polite but distant, sent a friend request on social media. The Andersons, who had unwittingly occupied my seat, sent a lavish flower arrangement with a note expressing their embarrassment at being unknowing participants in an uncomfortable situation. By midday, everyone from the dinner had reached out. Everyone except Diane. Ethan called during his lunch break, concern evident in his voice. Dad called me this morning. What happened last night? Are you okay? I gave him the condensed version, trying to stick to facts rather than emotions. As I spoke, I could hear his breathing change, growing heavier with each detail. I can't believe she did that, he said when I finished. Actually, no, I can believe it. I just can't believe I've let it go on so long. I'm so sorry, Morgan. You didn't know she'd pull something like this. But I knew how she treats you. I've known for years, and I've made excuses because it was easier than confronting her. His voice cracked slightly. That stops now. I'm coming home early. My flight lands tonight. When Ethan arrived home, exhausted from his rush travel arrangements, he held me longer than usual. No more, he whispered into my hair. No more letting her treat you like this. The next day, Harold called to invite us to their home. Diane has something she'd like to say, he explained. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Harold, I don't know if I'm ready for another performance. I understand your hesitation, he said, his tone unusually serious. But I think this is important. For all of us, Ethan and I drove to the Preston estate in silence, both of us mentally preparing for whatever awaited. The sprawling colonial looked the same as always, immaculate and imposing, but something felt different as we walked up the familiar path to the front door. Harold greeted us himself, unusual, as they typically had household staff answer the door. Thank you for coming, he said, leading us to the formal living room where Diane sat perched on the edge of an antique settee. She looked smaller somehow, less formidable than she had the night before. Her perfect posture remained, but there was a tightness around her eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. Ethan Morgan, she acknowledged as we sat across from her. Thank you for coming. An uncomfortable silence followed. Harold cleared his throat pointedly. I want to apologize, Diane finally said, each word clearly rehearsed. My behavior at the restaurant was inappropriate. I should not have excluded you from the dinner, Morgan. Ethan tensed beside me. That's it. After years of making Morgan feel unwelcome, after deliberately humiliating her in public, all you have to say is it was inappropriate. Ethan, Harold began, but Diane raised a hand to stop him. Your father and I had a long conversation last night, she said, looking directly at Ethan. He helped me see that my behavior has been problematic. Ethan echoed incredulously. Mom, you've been borderline cruel to Morgan since the day you met her. Why? Because her family doesn't belong to the right clubs, because she worked her way through college instead of having it handed to her. Diane flinched at his words. It wasn't that simple. Then explain it to me, he challenged. Help me understand why you've spent 6 years trying to make my wife feel like she doesn't belong in this family. For a moment I thought Diane might retreat behind her usual veneer of icy propriety. Instead, something unexpected happened. Her carefully constructed facade cracked. Because she didn't need us, she said quietly. You didn't need us anymore. Ethan and I exchanged confused glances. What are you talking about? He asked. Diane smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. From the moment you were born, everything was planned. The best schools, the right connections, joining your father's firm. We gave you everything, paved every step of your path. Her voice wavered slightly. Then you met Morgan and suddenly our plans, our world, wasn't good enough anymore. You started talking about making your own way and finding meaning beyond wealth. She looked at me then, really looked at me perhaps for the first time. You were so self-sufficient. So confident in who you were, where you came from. You didn't want our connections or our lifestyle. Worse, you made Ethan question it too. The revelation hung in the air between us. All this time I thought Diane's issue was that I wasn't good enough for their world. The truth was more complex. She feared I was pulling Ethan away from the life she had carefully constructed for him. Mom, Ethan said gently, I was questioning that path long before I met Morgan. She just gave me the courage to choose differently. I never wanted to take Ethan away from his family, I added. I only wanted him to be happy to find fulfillment in his choices rather than following a predetermined script. Harold moved to sit beside his wife, taking her hand in his. I've been telling Diane for years that success looks different for your generation. That making your own way is something to be proud of, not something to fear. I'm trying to understand that, Diane admitted. It's difficult to let go of expectations I've held for so long. It wasn't a complete transformation. Decades of class consciousness and social conditioning wouldn't disappear overnight. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall that had stood between us for years. I don't expect us to become best friends immediately, I said carefully, but I would like to move forward with mutual respect. Diane nodded. I think I can manage that. As we left the Preston estate that afternoon, Ethan squeezed my hand. That was unexpected. Your mother apologizing? Definitely. No, he said thoughtfully. Her being vulnerable. I can't remember the last time I saw her drop the perfect socialite act. Over the following weeks, small changes indicated that Diane was making an effort. She called occasionally with questions about restaurants she was considering for lunch with her friends. She forwarded an article about a restaurant turnaround that reminded her of my work. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Rachel and I met for the promised lunch where she shared stories about growing up with Diane's rigid expectations. It was suffocating sometimes, she admitted. Everything had to be perfect, had to fit the image she wanted to project. That sounds exhausting, I said. It was, still is sometimes. She stirred her iced tea thoughtfully. You know what the craziest part is? Mom comes from nothing. Her father was a janitor. She worked as a waitress to put herself through community college. She met Dad when she was serving at a restaurant near his law school. I nearly choked on my water. Are you serious? Diane was a waitress. Rachel nodded. She reinvented herself completely when she married Dad. Changed her accent, studied etiquette books, cut ties with her old neighborhood. She spent 40 years making sure no one knows where she came from. Suddenly, so much about Diane made sense. Her obsession with appearances, her hyper-awareness of class markers, her discomfort with my background that so closely mirrored her own origins. She hadn't rejected me because I wasn't good enough. She'd rejected me because I reminded her of the self she had worked so hard to erase. 6 months after the infamous anniversary dinner, Ethan and I hosted a gathering at our home, a housewarming of sorts, though we'd lived there for nearly 2 years. We'd recently completed renovations on our kitchen, transforming it into a space where I could experiment with recipes and host cooking classes for friends. This is lovely, Harold commented as he accepted a glass of wine. You've done wonders with the place. Our home was modest by Preston standards, a renovated craftsman with character rather than grandeur, but we'd made it our own. Blending Ethan's appreciation for quality with my practicality, I watched as our guests mingled in the backyard garden. James had come with his wife Charlotte, bringing wine from a small vineyard he'd recently discovered. Rachel and Colin's 2-year-old daughter played with a neighbor's child on a blanket in the shade. My parents chatted easily with Harold near the grill. My father's sharing tips on maintaining the vintage motorcycle Harold had recently purchased as a retirement project. And then there was Diane, perched somewhat stiffly on a garden chair, but present nonetheless. She was engaged in conversation with my Aunt Susan, who had taken over my late aunt's diner and turned it into a successful farm-to-table breakfast spot with my occasional consulting input. Morgan. A voice pulled me from my observations. It was Diane's niece Zoe, a college sophomore studying hospitality management. Could I ask you something about my internship applications? Of course, I replied, gesturing for her to follow me into the quieter kitchen. Since the night at Lumiere, Zoe had sought my advice several times, drawn to my career path in a way that surprised both of us. I have interviews with 3 different hotel groups, she explained, pulling up notes on her phone. But I'm not sure which would offer better experience for someone interested in restaurant development. As we discussed the pros and cons of each opportunity, I caught Diane watching us through the window. Our eyes met briefly, and she gave me a small nod, acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. The relationship between Diane and me remained complex. There were still awkward moments, still occasions when her ingrained classism slipped through, but something fundamental had shifted. The revelation of her own humble beginnings had never been directly addressed between us. Rachel had sworn me to secrecy about that confidence, but knowing it had helped me understand her in ways I couldn't before. Later, as guests began to depart, Diane approached me in a quiet moment. "That marinade for the chicken was exceptional," she said. "Would you share the recipe?" "Of course," I replied, surprised by the request. "It's my grandmother's." Very simple ingredients, but the technique makes all the difference. She hesitated, then added, "Perhaps you could show me some time. I used to enjoy cooking years ago." The admission that she had once occupied kitchens as a creator rather than just a director of household staff felt significant. A small piece of her true self revealed. "I'd like that," I said honestly. After all our guests had left and Ethan and I were cleaning up the last of the dishes, he wrapped his arms around me from behind. "That went well," I think he murmured against my hair. "Better than I expected," I agreed, leaning back into his embrace. "Your mom actually ate my food without looking for invisible flaws." He chuckled progress. We worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before he spoke again. "I've been thinking about something." What would you think about starting a family soon?" I turned to face him, searching his expression. "Really? You're ready?" He nodded. "I think so. Watching you with Rachel's little girl today, I could see you as a mother, a great one." "And what kind of in-laws will we be, do you think?" I asked, only half joking. "The kind that respect boundaries," he said firmly. "The kind that support without controlling. The kind that accept our children's choices, even when they're different from what we imagined." I thought about the journey with Diane, from rejection to reluctant acceptance to our current cautious rapport. I thought about how assumptions and fear had robbed us of years of potential connection. I thought about the healing that had begun, imperfect though it was. "I'd like that," I said, resting my head against his chest. "To break the cycle." Looking back on that night at Lumiere now, I see it as the turning point it truly was. Not because I won or Diane lost, but because truth finally broke through the careful facades we'd all maintained. Her illusions about who I was, and perhaps more importantly, her illusions about who she was, couldn't survive in the light of reality. The lesson wasn't that success earns respect, though that was part of it. The deeper truth was that authenticity, being genuinely yourself without apology, creates freedom that no amount of social positioning can provide. Diane had spent decades hiding her origins, curating a perfect image at the cost of genuine connection. I had nearly fallen into the trap of seeking her approval, of trying to fit into a world that wasn't mine. In standing my ground that night, in refusing to be diminished, I found something more valuable than my mother-in-law's acceptance. I found conviction in my own worth, independent of others' validation. Family relationships are complex tapestries woven from love, expectation, history, and hope. The threads that connect us can tangle and knot, creating patterns we never intended. But with patience and courage, even the most twisted patterns can be reworked into something new, not perfect, perhaps, but authentic and strong in its imperfection. As Ethan and I discuss our future family, I think about the legacy we want to create, one of acceptance rather than expectation, of support rather than control. I think about the kind of mother-in-law I might become someday, and I commit to remembering how it feels to be on the outside looking in. Have you ever stood your ground when someone tried to make you feel small? Did it change your relationship in unexpected ways? Share your experiences in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you've navigated challenging family dynamics. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and standing in your truth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Story 4. My husband cheated and my wealthy in-laws mocked me, claiming they'd crush me in divorce court. But I had the last laugh when they ended up in jail after I uncovered key evidence. I, 24 female, got married to David, 25 male, a year ago, after being in a relationship for 2 years. We met through my cousin who went to college with him and became good friends with David. He and I come from very, very different families, and I still don't know how we managed to stay together for so long when we're so different ourselves. For context, my parents are both realtors and I had a normal childhood. I also have a sister who's 3 years younger than me, so I wasn't spoiled either. We weren't too rich, but we weren't exactly poor, somewhere in the middle. It wasn't the same for David, who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was the only child of his father, Sean, 50 male. And since Sean was a business tycoon, David was a totally spoiled brat. His mother, Naomi, 48 female, was a socialite, and didn't do much apart from attending parties and going on shopping sprees, mostly because she didn't need to do anything else. They were literally straight out of a novel, and not in a good way. My in-laws were rich and arrogant in the worst possible way, and they didn't even try to make me feel comfortable when I first met them. In hindsight, it feels weird that I didn't think their behavior was odd, but I was so in love with David that I didn't even care how his parents were. Neither did I care about the fact that they demanded I live with him once we got married. I just agreed to all their terms and conditions because I wanted to marry David, and I assumed that so did he. He was my first serious boyfriend, and before him, I'd only ever had short flings with either men who weren't serious about me or men whom I didn't care for much. David was sweet, charming, and seemed like the perfect guy while we were dating, so I didn't think there was anything wrong with moving in with my in-laws once we got married. To be fair, they lived in a literal mansion, and I believed that we'd have our personal space in spite of the living arrangement. His parents had also been quite civil to me before we got hitched, and that was yet another reason for me not to question things. After I said yes to his proposal and agreed to their arrangement, it was my in-laws who seemed thrilled and covered the cost of the entire wedding, even though my parents had said that they wouldn't mind splitting the cost. My family and I actually thought that they really liked me, and we even discussed at length how they were being so kind to me. We had no idea what was to come, especially with regards to David, who had never been anything but perfect in my head. David and I ended the lease on a rented apartment a week before our wedding and moved in with his parents soon after the wedding. The first few days were nice enough, but gradually things began to change, for the worse, and it was so slow in the initial days that I barely even noticed it. Both Sean and Naomi had started becoming a lot colder towards me and weren't as civil in their way of speaking as they used to be. Earlier, they'd ignore my existence if it suited them, and then if they were feeling mean, they'd make snide comments about me and my family. David told me not to mind it initially and said that once we'd had a baby, it would cement my place in the family, and my in-laws would turn over a new leaf. But I wasn't ready to have kids and wanted to wait it out. That led to a few arguments and fights between us, after which he started growing distant from me and wouldn't spend as much time with me as he would earlier. This was just the first 3 months of our marriage, and they'd already started showing their true colors, but I still stupidly kept hoping that things would get better eventually. After a couple of months passed, the pressure to have a baby began to build from all sides, and I began to seriously consider moving back home. But every time I'd say that to David, he'd tell me that he loved me and couldn't bear to live without me. It became a vicious cycle, and I was just so exhausted that I even fell behind at work. I'd already said no to taking the lead on a few big projects that had been offered to me and let others manage those because I wasn't sure if I'd be able to handle the pressure from my in-laws and work all together. I was in a very dark place at the time and didn't even have the energy to fight for myself when it came to David, his parents, and their constant nagging and jibes. I kind of gave up and took it all without complaint because I didn't feel brave enough to say a word. Looking back, it sucks that I let things get so bad in the first place. I could have left him, but I loved him, and every time I'd want to leave, he'd play the "I love you and can't live without you" card, which just made it impossible for me to leave. I was already feeling weak, and it just made me feel worse about even thinking of leaving when my husband insisted that he loved me so much. I was trapped, so to speak. This went on for a while and would have probably gone on for longer had I not discovered David's affair about 3 weeks ago. I was reading in bed, and David had gone on a jog. He'd left his phone on the bed, but after a while I heard buzzing from another source, which seemed weird. I checked the phone that was on his bed, and that wasn't it, so I looked all over the room and located another phone in his laptop bag. I'd never seen that phone before, and neither did I know anyone by the name of Jessica. It took me a few seconds to process what I was witnessing. I kept the phone with me and tried to unlock it with no luck, so I decided to wait for David to come back home. When he came back home, we talked for a while, and then he went to sleep. After he fell asleep, I used his face to unlock the phone and went through the only messages he had on the phone, the ones with Jessica. Their texts were all pretty explicit, and it was obvious that he was having an affair with this lady. They'd made several plans to meet and had gone through with those plans as well. From the looks of it, the texts went back to almost 4 months after we'd just been together a little over half a year. The recent texts weren't very flirty or cute, though. They were mostly Jessica demanding an explanation for something that had happened and insisting that he either leave me or get the job done that he promised. David had been ignoring her for the most part, and that's probably why she'd called that day, while reading the texts. I recorded it all with my phone and even took screenshots and sent them to my email address for good measure. Then I cried myself to sleep as silently as I could, because the realization that David had been cheating on me for the past 4 months had finally hit me, and I couldn't hold it together anymore. I cried the entire night away, but by the next morning I was ready to confront David about what I'd found. I expected him to deny it, or try to get me to forgive him, but he did none of those things. To my surprise, he owned it and told me very confidently that he had cheated on me with an employee and that everyone in the family knew about it as well. Apparently, he'd meant to tell me about it, but he thought it would get in the way of having a child, and he didn't want that right now because his parents were hounding him to have a baby so they'd have an heir for the company at the earliest. That was pretty much my only purpose as a member of their family, to present them with a kid so they'd have someone to take over the business eventually. And that's why he'd married me so early. According to him and my in-laws, these were my prime years, and I'd have to have a baby soon. It was already bad enough that I came from such a financially weak background. The least I could do for them was give them a healthy child at the right time. He even had the audacity to tell me that he was getting stressed out because of my refusal to have a baby and the pressure that his parents had put him under, which is why he'd had an affair. He'd been honest with his family about it, so there was no need for me to get so mad since his parents didn't mind. Jessica was just his stress relief, but at the end of the day I was the one he loved, and I was his wife, so I didn't have to worry. After saying all that rubbish to me, he left for work that day without even waiting for a reply because he thought this was totally normal behavior. I packed my stuff up right after he left and snuck out of the house to go back to my parents' place, where I told them everything. They had no idea how my life was at my in-laws' place because I'd never told them out of fear that there'd be a ton of drama if I did. After I found out about the affair, I realized there was no point in holding back anymore and spilled everything. My parents were very supportive and instantly put me in touch with one of their friends who happened to have a son who was a divorce attorney. I told David that I needed some time to think and that I'd be living with my parents for a while, and he bought it. In the meantime, I worked out the divorce papers with my lawyer, and within 3 days he'd been served. He didn't see it coming because I hadn't mentioned anything about divorce even after I'd learned about the affair, so he was definitely taken aback. The day he was served, he came right over to my parents' house. He thought that he could argue his way back into my life, but in my head, our relationship was over and I'd accepted that, so his arguments were all pointless. He went back home, disappointed that I wasn't staying with him despite his cheating, which just goes to show that he really did think of me as nothing but a huge pushover who could be bossed around all the time and I'd stay. Nevertheless, the day after that, I received a call from my in-laws, and Naomi told me that I'd pay for what I'd done to her son, because he'd apparently been miserable once he realized I wasn't coming back. She told me that I'd made her son cry, and that's why they'd make sure that I was absolutely destroyed in court. I told them I could handle it and then blocked them, but that was just all talk. I knew they were rich and influential people, so picking a fight with them wasn't exactly in my best interests. After contemplating for a couple of days, I decided to take a leap of faith and get in touch with Jessica. I remembered that they hadn't been on good terms in the recent past, judging by their texts, and I hoped that she'd be willing to help me out. After a lot of stalking, I found out that Jessica was actually an employee where David worked. Sean was the founder and CEO of the company, and David was the COO of the same company. Jessica worked under David, which I found out from their website. Once I found her social media account, I decided to text her and ask her to meet me because I didn't think these things were appropriate to be discussed in text. She agreed, and we met at a nearby cafe about a week ago. She was a couple of years older than us, very attractive and single, so it was no big surprise that David had chosen her to have an affair with. She apologized to me for wrecking my home, but also said that it wasn't personal, and the only reason she'd gotten involved with David was because he was the one who initiated the affair and had promised her a huge promotion and raise if she agreed. So for her, it was mostly greed and ambition that allowed her to forget that David was a married man and continued the affair with him, and for David, it was just a stress buster. She told me that she'd continued to work even after the affair ended about a month ago, because the promotion that she'd been promised ended up going to some other employee who also happened to be a woman. This had led her to believe that she was probably not the only person David was involved with in the office. She'd been trying to get back at David by texting him on his secret phone that he usually hid from me by keeping it turned off along with his laptop. But on the day that I'd found out, he'd probably forgotten to do so. Jessica confessed to me that she'd been trying to blackmail him into promoting her, or else she'd come out with the truth and end our marriage. So he could either leave me himself or she'd arrange it for him. Unfortunately, the threats had no effect on him because somewhere deep down, both of them knew that he had way too much influence and wasn't going to be intimidated by an ordinary employee. She'd be the one jeopardizing her future career if she spoke up, and that's why she'd had to continue working in silence despite knowing what she did. Because she was scared she'd lose her job if she said anything against him. Me texting her had given her some hope, and that's why she'd agreed to meet me so we could at least come up with some idea about what to do next. I explained my side of the story to her, and then we decided that for now, her best bet would be to file a report with the police to make sure this goes on his record and get in touch with the other female employees of the office so we could find out if he was involved with any of them or not. After about 4 days, she told me that she'd spoken to most of the female employees she worked with, and the majority of them said that they had been offered such deals by David where he'd hinted at promotions if they agreed to his terms. A lot of them had turned him down, but another woman, the one who had been promoted, told us that she'd had an affair with not only David but also Sean. When she heard that Jessica was about to receive the promotion over her, she dropped by at their house to confront them in person. I wasn't at home at the time and had been away with a few of my friends, so I hadn't witnessed this incident personally. But she told me that, when she confronted the two men, Naomi had actually physically attacked her and slapped her senselessly. She'd pinned her down to the floor with Sean's help while David yelled at them to stop, but didn't actually do anything to stop them physically. They'd hurt her pretty badly, and she went home with scratches and bruises all over because of how vicious Naomi had been while screaming at her like crazy and accusing her of being an immoral homewrecker. Once she got home, she called David and told him that she was going to complain to the cops, but he pacified her and told her that he'd make sure she got the promotion she deserved as long as she kept the affairs quiet. So, in exchange for that, she agreed. But even now, Sean had continued to verbally abuse her and treat her like crap when no other employees were around. She'd stayed quiet for the same reason as Jessica, because she knew how powerful these people were, and she didn't want to invite trouble for herself for no reason. In addition to that, she also didn't have any proof of the attack itself, so she couldn't come out and accuse Naomi because she knew they'd destroy her. When she said that, I finally remembered something I'd done ages ago, back when David and I had started fighting over when to have a baby. When nobody was at home, not even the housekeeper, I'd had CCTV cameras with recorders installed in every room of the house because I'm a generally paranoid person. And things were so bad at the time that I'd started considering divorce, but hadn't left. I'd installed the cameras so I'd have proof of the kind of mistreatment I was going through for the divorce to make it easier. But then I'd forgotten about it because things were so bad. When I was told that she didn't go to the police because she had no proof of the attack, I decided to finally log into the system and check out the footage from the date she'd mentioned. Luckily, the cameras had captured every single thing. It was horrifying to watch Naomi attack her while Sean helped her out, and my husband just stood by doing the bare minimum but not actually bothering to physically intervene. I knew they were horrible people, but this was way too much for even me to stomach. And even talking about this right now makes me feel so uncomfortable. Once I found the footage, I forwarded it to the two women and told them to go report everything to the cops, which they did. A few days ago, my husband and in-laws were all arrested for the things they'd done, and I couldn't have been happier about it. It was David's lawyer who called me and told me about it because apparently David had said that he wanted to speak to me. They were all being detained in prison until the trial started, but I had no intention of going to visit him. When I told his lawyer that I wasn't interested in seeing him again, the man literally lashed out at me and called me all sorts of degrading names. It wasn't surprising because David and his lawyer were actually childhood friends, but for him to take things so personally was a little surprising for me. He accused me of using and manipulating David's co-workers so that it would be easier for me to get what I wanted in the divorce settlement, which made me just as bad as him, if not worse, since even I was using people for my own gain. I didn't know what to say to him, so I just hung up without arguing, but now that I think of it, it kind of does make sense. After all, I did push Jessica, the other woman, and God knows how many other employees into something that would definitely affect their future and their careers, all because I didn't want my divorce to go awry, and I was too scared to go up against my in-laws all by myself. I keep trying to convince myself that everything will work out fine for everyone involved, but I don't know that for sure, so if things don't go well for Jessica and the others, that'll be my fault, and I'll never be able to forgive myself for it. On the other hand, I also don't think it's a bad thing that they're in jail right now, because they're all pretty messed up people and don't deserve to roam around freely. There's no telling whose life they might ruin next. I could talk about this to my friends and family, but they'd side with me, and that's why I've turned to Reddit for an honest and unbiased verdict. AITA for pushing my husband's employees to report him so that I have more leverage over him to work with for our upcoming divorce settlement. Update 1. I didn't expect this post to blow up the way it did, and the support has been overwhelming, so I've had to take my time to process things. I'm also going through a divorce right now, so things have been pretty messy. I have, however, been going through the comments and the messages that you guys have sent, and I'm really thankful for your kind words. It makes it a lot easier for me to deal with my current life right now. I don't know how long this process is going to take, because right now we're still in the early stages of negotiations for the settlement and alimony, but I'm hopeful that things will get easier and better, slowly but surely. There's also the ongoing trial regarding David, where quite a few ex-employees have also come out and spoken up against him. It's pretty scary that these things happened, and I had no clue about it at all. My cousin, who introduced me to him, heard about this in the local news and reached out to me to apologize for even introducing me to such a horrible man and an even worse family. Jessica has been keeping me updated on the trial and not looking too good for them at the moment. They might be looking at anywhere from 3 years to even 5 or more. It's crazy how David, in spite of the situation he's in, has still managed to get on my last nerve during the negotiations. They're conducted online because I refuse to go out there to see him in person. He doesn't deserve that. He always makes it a point to tell me that he loved me and that I ruined his life. Like, no, you ruined your own life by cheating on your wife and being a creep. That's not my fault. It's tough right now, but I'm trying to go with the flow. Update 2, it's final. The judge ruled that David and his parents were going to jail for 3 years. He was able to wiggle out of a more strict punishment because at least the relationships were consensual, even though it was still basically exploitation of his employees. He's also going to have to pay a huge sum to all the women who spoke up and testified against him, and that's definitely going to affect his bank balance significantly. I don't know how that's going to affect my settlement and alimony, but I guess I'll find out soon enough. For now, I'm just happy that he's going to face punishment for whatever he put these women through. He totally deserves this, and much worse if I'm being honest. Update 3, hi everyone. So I'm back after a long time, and I guess people have been wondering what happened to me. Things have been better ever since my divorce was finalized about 6 weeks ago. David and his parents had to sell off all their assets to be able to pay off and compensate their victims. I also received the amount I'd asked for in the settlement, and the alimony is going to be paid in installments over the next couple of years. I'm not sure if he'll be able to pay off the entire amount, though, judging by the state of their company. Their stocks have been plummeting steadily ever since the news of their arrest broke, and they haven't managed to recover since. Even though their board of directors has put other people in charge to replace David and Sean, it's quite possible that they might go bankrupt and shut down, which would be sad for the other employees. But they can always find other jobs where they don't have to work for creeps like these. I hope their company gets shut down and they go bankrupt, to be honest. Yeah, I won't get my alimony, but it'll be totally worth it. Still, for now, I'm just focusing on rebuilding my own career and life. I'm going to therapy, to the gym, and just trying to live my life the way I'd wanted to before David came along and ruined it all. Story 5. Am I the whole for abandoning a grieving friend after she tried to charge me rent? My friend is a recent widow. It's been a long time coming, but that hardly makes it easier. Her husband passed away at the end of February, and she has been understandably distraught since. I have tried my best to support her through this, even though I can't possibly understand what she's going through. At the beginning of March, she asked me if I'd stay over during the night because she couldn't stand sleeping alone in an empty house. I obliged and temporarily moved in once I was sure my husband was okay with it. She's not been taking care of herself, so I have been doing 100% of the household chores and taking care of her and all her responsibilities, as well as working full-time. Last week she springs on me how much she'll be expecting in rent from here on out. She heavily implied I was taking advantage of her and her grief, trying to live in her house for free, and that she expects me to back pay her rent for the 2 months I'd already been there. I was extremely insulted by this, and told her I'd transfer her the money she wanted, but I would be moving back to my own house, where I am also paying rent. I got my stuff and was out within a couple of hours. She hasn't asked me to come back, but I have refused. I told her I'd still do her shopping and I'll come over to help her with a few bids, but I'm not spending another night in that house. Am I the whole? Now for the top comments. Not the whole. You didn't want to pay rent, so you went back to your own house. I think she's a bit of a hole asking you to come and stay with her and then asking you to pay money. I think you've set some healthy boundaries to avoid this situation occurring again. Told her I'd transfer her the money she wanted. Opie, did you actually pay this rent? If not, don't. If you did, what and why? I did. I don't know why. It was just easier. The easiest is to do nothing at all. It conserves the most energy and, in your case, money. In the future, think about this in economic terms. It cost you fake rent from a fake friend to keep you from having an unpleasant confrontation. That turned out to be what you were trying to avoid anyway. Getting angry is okay, Opie. It doesn't mean you're not a nice or good person. Don't let people walk over you. Please consider this as an expensive lesson. It's okay and completely free to say lol no to outrageous, outlandish, and categorically ridiculous demands of your money. Practice saying it so you can spit it out with gleeful ease the next time. Not to be a hoe, WTF. Taking advantage. You already have a place. What did you get out of it? I thought I was being a good friend. You were. I meant in terms of owing her rent money like she was doing something that was a favor to you. I don't know, she has very rigid ideas of when something is owed to her. You stay long-term equals you pay rent. Context be damned, I guess. Now for the next story. Am I the whole telling my sister to stay somewhere else after she embarrassed me with my neighbors? I'm 31 male, lived at the same home for 2 years, and I'm very friendly with my neighbors. They're nice people. Married couple in their late 40s with one 10-year-old daughter and a 14-year-old son. Every weekend since I've lived there, they like to have a small get-together with their family. Not a big party, but they do grill out on their porch, play music and chat. It's never more than 10 people. Honestly, it never bothered me. Music is always off by 10 p.m. and they don't get rowdy. My family isn't close like that, so it actually feels nice they do it every weekend, and sometimes they've invited me over for a burger. Like I said, nice people. My sister, 27 female, is having problems with her boyfriend, and she doesn't want to stay at their place right now, so here she is. The past month, she complained about my neighbors and how annoying they are. She doesn't know how I stand it and I should tell them something, but I've literally got no problem with it, and I told her they're not doing anything bad. Well, a couple weeks ago, I was approached by the husband, and he apologized for being so rude. Had no idea what he was talking about. He said my wife complained to him about their loud music the other weekend, and me and her both have gotten extremely annoyed by it. She threatened to call the police if they kept this up because they're disturbing the peace. That was pretty red from both anger and embarrassment, so I explained to him that I have no problems with that and she's my sister, not my wife. Apparently she said that so they'd take her seriously as the owner of the house. My sister refused to apologize and said she absolutely would call the police because they need to learn to not be annoying with their music. So that's when I told her to look somewhere else to see if she's going to cause problems with my neighbors. Right now, she's couch surfing between friends, and my family is pissed that I was willing to kick her out of my home over issues with my neighbors. My parents are far, so of course they can't take her, and because I'm the only person close to her, they feel like I'm not being a very good brother for caring more about this than my sister having somewhere to stay. I feel like I'm in a way justified in not wanting her to create problems between our houses, but at the same time, yeah, she doesn't have a place to stay right now. So, am I to a hole? Not to a hole. She can find somewhere else to stay. Buy your neighbors a crate of beer and tell them to party on. Good neighbors should be cherished. They don't drink, but yeah, I was thinking of getting a gift of some sort to apologize. They barbecue, maybe throw some meat/grill friendly veg their way. Apologies take works wonders. Not to a hole. Do not allow her toxicity to continue in your own space. Your voice and choice should be more important than those of your visitors. 1. She had a sense of entitlement in a place that is not even her property. 2. She gave a false impression to others that she is the owner of your house in order to assert a fake right. 3. She created a rift between you and your nice neighbors by threatening them. 4. She did all of these signs of disrespect behind your back and without your permission. 5. She was not apologetic when you confronted her. She has no regrets. You are supposed to feel comfortable in your own house with your own rules, not with visitors. And when you told her that wasn't acceptable, she doubled down and threatened to still call the police next time. Beyond entitled. No wonder she's having problems with her boyfriend. Not to a whole, by the way. Can't live with her boyfriend, can't live next to nice neighbors, won't apologize to her brother who is giving her free accommodation, and yet it's Opie's fault she's homeless. That's some twisted logic the parents have going on. Next story is titled, Am I to a hole for telling my cousin to move out? I 27F own my house. I also have a 9-month-old puppy and a 3-month-old puppy. The younger one is obviously not fully housebroken. My cousin, mom, and brother all live with me. I've been having a hard time with the fact I'm the only one cleaning anything in the house, including the bathroom I don't use since I have my own in my room. Anyway, yesterday morning, I wake up to a note from my cousin on the kitchen table, saying the dogs are to be crated every time I leave the house and every time I go to sleep. My dog's free room, and I own the house. I'm not gonna be told what to do with my dogs, and they also are in my room with me all night with the door closed. I also woke up to my dogs having busted open a bag of confectionery sugar all over the couch because my cousin forgot to close the pantry door. This was done when I was getting ready for work. This is a constant fight with him. I tell him to close the bathroom door constantly so the dogs don't get to the trash or toilet paper. Everyone else in the house can remember, but he can't. He was also mad the younger puppy had an accident in the house. When he woke up, I told him my dogs will not be crated. The younger puppy is 3 months old and not fully potty trained yet, and the accidents are becoming less frequent. I told him it was his fault he left the pantry door wide open, just like I have to clean up the mess in the bathroom every day when he doesn't close the door. I also told him that I said no DS in my house, and my older puppy found a hairy needle, and I stopped her from chewing it, and thank God it was still capped and empty. I'm home all day with my dogs since I work from home, but it's a call center environment and I can't get up from my desk. I told him it's being careless and potentially causing my dogs harm. He didn't like that and we got into a fight. Then I told him to leave. He said I was neglecting my dogs, which sets me off because my dogs are my children, and if he would just clean up after himself, it wouldn't be an issue. I told him before he complains about my dogs, he should learn to clean up after himself and stop leaving trash all over the kitchen for me to clean. He said he was moving out, so I said, fine, you can leave now since you're being so careless with the measures I put in place so the dogs don't make a mess and get into stuff that can hurt them. He called the police, and they said I have to evict him, but still asked him to leave. My mom said I could have handled it better, but I'm tired of being nice and asking politely when it obviously doesn't do anything. He was also mad I asked him to move his work equipment from my front patio for the millionth time because I said I don't want it there, it looks trashy. I'm just trying to keep my house inside and out clean and keep my dogs safe. Am I the hole for telling him to just get out? Now for the top comments. Not the hole. Heads up, if he is doing substances, make sure he won. Doesn't give the dogs any out of spite before he moves, too. Doesn't leave them, then calls the cops and says you have substances in your house. I'd also have the locks changed once he fully is out. Thank you. Right now, he is staying with his mother, and the police told him not to come to my house with an additional party present for both of us. He is supposed to be renting a U-Haul and setting up a time to get all of his stuff out of my house, and I am most definitely changing the locks. Because even if I get the key back, there's no saying he didn't make a copy already. Just be careful. I'd put the dogs in your room, locked if possible when he comes over, then check everything before letting them out. I know it's a pain, but he could be vindictive against them. Not just you. Not the whole. I also told him that I said no substances in my house and my older puppy found an H needle. Everything else in your post aside, that right there is more than enough reason to kick him the hell out. And the fact that he wrote you a note saying your dogs were to be created in your own house is sufficient on its own as well. Life is too short to deal with BS, people, family or not. Dude can find a new place to crash. That's what I told him. I told him he should have been kicked out right then and there. He's lucky he's had an additional few months. I'm tired of him disrespecting my house. Not the whole, it's your house. He isn't abiding by your rules and is trying to push you around in your own house. Get him out. It'd make sure the door does hit him on the way out. That's what got me about the note. I was like, I'm not being told what to do in my house. Last story is titled, Am I the hole for assembling IKEA furniture in my apartment? So I, 21, lived in this apartment for 4 years with no issue at all. An old dude, Larry, moved in under our apartment like 6 months ago or maybe a bit more. At first, I had issues with him because I would be tanning outside in underwear. I didn't care if people could see me or I would have put on more clothes. But I felt extremely uncomfortable because Larry and his colleague, who is also old, 60-something, decided to move my items on my table and sit down in my chairs right next to me. They also talked about me as if I wasn't there and made random remarks. I can't stress enough how close they sat and how uncomfortable I was. There are multiple tables they could have sat at. I moved because it made me so uncomfortable, and the colleague yelled rude things after me. Later, he's told me when I can and can't work out on my fitness mat because he has night shifts. The mat takes practically all the noise, and I work out for like 50-60 minutes 3 times a week, usually around 2-4 p.m., not 11 p.m. or 8 a.m. Now I'm assembling IKEA furniture in my room. It's like close to 4 p.m. now. I started at around 3 p.m. I've been as quiet as possible, but now I've come to the part where I have to hammer in nails, about 20 in total. Again, I try to be gentle, but it does go through the floor a bit. I have nowhere else to do this. If I did it outside, the furniture would get scratched up horribly. It's cheap. I've finished 8 nails and now he's banging on his ceiling, which is my floor. But what else am I supposed to do? Have no furniture and put my plants, etc. on the floor. It's not my fault he's hungover today. About Dajjal, though, I'm having cold sweats because he makes me so uncomfortable, and him banging back makes me really worried he's gonna come up here and yell at me. I never really make noise, though, and we've never had any complaints. Not Dajjal. If he expects zero noise where he lives, he shouldn't live in an apartment building. He at least probably stipulates quiet hours. Generally, those are 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Pretty much. If I would be had to assemble the furniture at times when their neighbor is not sleeping, that might just as well end up overlapping with the quiet hours time frame. At that time, someone could actually even rightfully call the cops on them. Was I happy when someone was drilling holes in their walls at 2 p.m. while I was trying to sleep after a night shift at the hospital? Well, of course not, but all I could do about it was using some earplugs because people usually don't sleep at 2 p.m. Not Dajjal. You're doing it at a reasonable time of day and being as quiet as possible. Just finish it up and move on with your day. If he comes up to yell, then be firm but polite. I'm sorry I disturbed you. I do not need to assemble furniture often, but it is a necessary evil sometimes. Have a nice day. Thank you. It's really nice to have a response ready. Not Dajjal. Also, the behavior exhibited by him at his friend is super creepy. Is there anyone you can complain to about this? I'm very good friends with the landlord and am actually headed to clean one of his other apartment complexes after this. My mom is a bit on the fence, though. She wants everyone to get along. I'm guessing we'll see how the summer goes and then take action from there. Update. Thanks to everyone commenting. I was shaking and sweating when I wrote this post, but a lot of you helped calm me down. Sorry for the misunderstandings about the whole essay thing or whatever we want to call it. While I was hammering, my mom went down to knock on his door and he made some BS excuse but backed off. She's also gonna talk to our landlord next time she sees him because we were good friends with him and I don't feel entirely safe. Mom got a tight hug. Thank you. You're welcome. Story 6 parents kicked me out just because the golden child sister couldn't stand me. 10 years ago, my life basically got flipped upside down because my family, especially my sister Claire, decided to kick me out of the house. And why? Because they thought I was some sort of traitor for figuring out how to pay for my college tuition without their help. I was 18, just about to start college, and suddenly I found myself with nowhere to go. This all happened thanks to Claire, the golden child who always managed to make me look like I was barely worth anything in comparison. Claire is 4 years older than me, and from the time we were kids it was clear that she was the favorite. Like not just a little bit. I mean, my parents were obsessed with her. If she got an A, they'd throw her a freaking parade. But if I got an A, it was like, oh cool, what's for dinner? You get the idea. So I kind of grew up with the mentality that it didn't matter what I did because Claire would always outshine me. By the time she went off to a top business school, My parents were all over it, like she was some sort of prodigy. They paid for everything, her tuition, her apartment, her fancy clothes. Meanwhile, I kept my head down and figured I'd have to do things on my own. So when I got accepted into a reputable college in the UK to study history, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get a little bit of support. But nope, that wasn't happening. My parents straight up told me they couldn't afford my tuition, which, okay, I get it, college is expensive. But what really pissed me off was that they didn't even want to cosign a loan. I wasn't asking them to pay the whole thing just to help me out so I wouldn't be drowning in debt my whole life. But they refused and we fought about it a lot. Their reasoning: we already paid for Claire's college, we have to think about our future now. Oh, and they were also planning to start some kind of small business around that time. So apparently all their savings were going into that. I was completely stuck. I didn't want to lose the opportunity to go to this college, but it felt like my parents were just throwing obstacles in my way for no reason. They had no problem spending tons of money on Claire, but when it came to me, suddenly they had to be frugal and responsible. I needed help, and it became pretty obvious that they weren't going to give it to me. So, with no other options, I turned to my Aunt Denise. Now Denise is my dad's older sister, and let me just say, she's like the total opposite of my parents. She's a neurosurgeon and honestly way more successful than either of them, but she's also super down to earth. My parents always had this weird tension with her. They'd act all polite at family gatherings, but I could tell they were bitter about how successful she was compared to them. My dad, in particular, hated feeling like she overshadowed him. I didn't really want to get her involved at first, but I was desperate. I reached out to her one day, asking if she'd be willing to help me with the tuition. She didn't even hesitate. She was like, "Of course I'll help. Why didn't you come to me sooner?" But I was terrified that my dad would find out. If he knew I had gone behind his back to ask for money from his sister, he'd lose his mind. So I begged Denise to keep it a secret. Things were fine for a while after that. I figured I was in the clear. My tuition was covered, and I was getting ready to leave for school. That's when Claire decided to ruin everything. To this day, I still don't know how she found out about me asking Aunt Denise for help, but she did. And being Claire, she couldn't just let it go. She had to blow it up into this huge, dramatic thing. One night I came home after hanging out with some friends, and immediately I knew something was off. All my stuff was packed up in boxes. Everything. My clothes, my books, even my bedding. My parents were sitting in the living room, and Claire was standing there with this smug, self-satisfied look on her face. It felt like I had walked into some twisted intervention. My dad didn't waste any time. He threw a stack of papers at me and said, "Explain this." I had no idea what he was talking about, so I looked at the papers, and that's when I realized Claire had gone full psycho. She had fabricated these fake emails between me and Aunt Denise, where it looked like I was betraying the family, leaking details about the business my parents were planning to start, in exchange for Aunt Denise paying for my tuition. I couldn't believe my eyes. Claire had gone through my laptop, found some emails between me and Denise, and then doctored them using Photoshop or whatever. She made it look like I had sold out our family. I was stunned. I tried to explain that it was all fake, but my parents didn't even listen. They just stood there saying, "We trusted you and you stabbed us in the back." It didn't matter what I said. They believed Claire because of course they did. They always believed her. It was like I didn't even exist anymore. They told me to pack my things and leave right then and there. I was officially kicked out of the house because of a complete lie. I begged them to reconsider. I didn't want to be a burden on Aunt Denise, especially after she had already agreed to pay for my tuition. But my parents didn't care. They said I was a traitor and they wanted nothing to do with me. So that was it. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a few boxes of my stuff, and I moved in with Aunt Denise. Honestly, I don't know how I would have survived if it weren't for her. She took me in without a second thought and treated me like actual family, something I hadn't felt in years. While my parents were busy worshiping Claire and focusing on their future business, Denise was the only one who really cared about me. And for that, I'll always be grateful. But to this day, I can't shake the memory of that night. Walking into my house and seeing all my stuff packed up, my parents staring at me like I was a criminal, and Claire standing there with that smug look on her face, knowing she had won. So there I was, kicked out of my own house, standing on Aunt Denise's doorstep with my life in boxes. I was still processing what the hell had just happened. It felt like a bad dream. I mean, how do you go from thinking you're part of a family to being homeless in one night? The whole thing was so surreal, but at the same time I couldn't say I was that surprised. My parents had always made it clear that Claire came first, but I guess I never thought they'd take it this far. Denise, being the angel that she is, welcomed me with open arms. She didn't ask a million questions. She didn't pry. She just saw that I was hurting and told me that her house was my house for as long as I needed. That kind of kindness. Man, it hit me right in the gut because I realized right then that I had never felt anything close to that for my own parents. So, I moved in with her. It was strange at first, waking up in her guest room, looking around at a house that wasn't mine, but over time, it started to feel more like home than the place I grew up in ever had. We started getting closer, talking more about everything. Turns out, Aunt Denise knew a lot more about my parents and their BS than I ever realized. She'd been keeping her distance from them for years, only showing up to family events because she felt obligated. She told me something that blew my mind. Apparently, my dad's grudge against her started way before I was born. Denise had always been more successful. She went to med school, got married to a great guy, who unfortunately passed away young and was living her life. Meanwhile, my dad was doing okay, but every time they met up, he'd get weirdly competitive. Denise said that their relationship basically became a game of who could look better to the rest of the family, but instead of just being proud of his sister, he resented her. And it wasn't just career stuff. My dad felt overshadowed in every way, financially, socially, everything. I guess that jealousy bled over into how he treated me. Denise had figured all this out years ago, but kept quiet because she didn't want to make things worse for me. Now that I was living with her, though, she told me everything. It was like she was trying to fill in all the gaps in my life that I hadn't been able to make sense of before. Why my parents never seemed to care about what I did, why they always bent over backward for Claire, it all boiled down to some weird family dynamic that I didn't even know existed. Living with Denise was great, but the thing is, I couldn't completely relax. I kept waiting for my parents to call, for Claire to show up out of nowhere, or for them to apologize for what they did. But of course, that never happened. Days turned into weeks and nothing, not a single text, not a single call. At first I was angry, like really angry. How could they just toss me aside like I was nothing? Then the anger kind of faded and I started to feel numb about the whole thing. It was like my brain was shutting off all my emotions just so I could function. Denise, though, she was amazing. She never pushed me to talk about what happened unless I wanted to. She let me take my time figuring things out. She even helped me get all my stuff sorted for school, making sure I had everything I needed before I left for the UK. I swear, if it weren't for her, I don't know how I would have gotten through that time. But even with her support, the silence from my parents was deafening. You'd think after kicking your kid out, you'd at least check up on them, right? But no, I guess I shouldn't have expected anything different, but I still did. One afternoon, about a month after the whole ordeal, I got a text from Claire. I remember it so clearly because it was just as obnoxious as she was. All it said was, "Hope you're doing okay. By the way, don't leave your laptop lying around." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a little smirk in text form reminding me that she was the one who got me thrown out. I stared at the screen, feeling my blood boil. She was taunting me, plain and simple. I didn't respond. What was the point? Claire wasn't the type to feel guilty about anything. In her mind, she had won some weird family game, and that was that. I thought about texting back something snarky, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She'd just get off on it. So I blocked her number and tried to move on. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at my phone, part of me was still waiting for something from my parents. Maybe a message from my mom, saying she regretted everything, or even a passive-aggressive email from my dad, pretending like nothing happened. But nope, radio silence. In the months that followed, Denise and I got into a solid routine. She became more than just my aunt. She became my confidant, my friend, and basically the only family I had left. I started to see how messed up my parents really were. They'd spent so long focusing on Claire, trying to mold her into some perfect daughter, that they completely missed out on everything else. And when Claire finally messed up, which she eventually would, it would be too late for them to fix it. Around the time I was getting ready to leave for school, I got another message. This time from my dad. It was short and direct. Good luck in the UK. That was it. No apology, no explanation, nothing. It felt like a slap in the face. After everything, all he had to say was good luck. I didn't even know how to respond, so I didn't. I just deleted the message and tried not to think about it. The day I left for the UK, Denise drove me to the airport. She hugged me and told me how proud she was, how she knew I'd do great things. It was the first time in my life that someone in my family had said those words to me, and it hit me harder than I expected. I got on that plane feeling like I was leaving more than just my home behind. I was leaving behind the part of me that had always tried to seek approval from my parents. From that moment on, I decided I didn't need them anymore. I had Denise, I had my future, and I had myself. If they wanted to reach out, fine. But I wasn't going to waste any more energy chasing after people who clearly didn't care about me. I was done. So life in the UK was going great. I settled into college, made some friends, and for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly thinking about my family. I won't say I forgot about them, I don't think that's possible, but they definitely weren't on my mind as much anymore. I was focused on my studies, figuring out my future, and just trying to enjoy life without the drama that came with living under my parents' shadow. But of course, just when things were going smoothly, something had to come and mess it up. I finished college and I came back to my city. I found a very good high-paying job, and then I got a call from my mom. Yeah, my mom. The same woman who hadn't spoken to me since the day they kicked me out. It was totally unexpected. I was sitting in my dorm room going over some notes for a paper when my phone buzzed. I saw her name pop up, and for a second I thought I was seeing things. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Should I answer it? Ignore it? After everything that had happened, why would she be calling me now? I let it ring a few more times, and then against my better judgment I picked up. "Hello," I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was pounding. There was a pause on the other end, like she wasn't sure what to say. Finally, she spoke. "Hi, it's your mother." "No kidding, who else would it be?" I didn't say that, though. I just stayed quiet, waiting for her to explain why she was calling after almost 2 years of nothing. She hesitated again, and then out of nowhere she said, "We need to talk." I couldn't help but scoff. Now she wanted to talk. After everything, it was so typical of her. But even though I was annoyed, a part of me was curious. What could possibly be so important that she was reaching out after all this time? "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Well, your father and we want to see you," she said, stumbling over her words like she was trying to figure out how to phrase it right. I could already tell where this was going. They didn't actually want to see me because they missed me or felt bad for kicking me out. There was something they needed, and I had a pretty good guess about what it was. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Why?" I asked bluntly. She didn't answer right away, which pretty much confirmed my suspicions. When she finally did speak, her voice was quieter, like she was trying to sound all motherly and concerned. "Your dad and we've been going through a hard time. Things haven't been easy since the pandemic." There it was, the real reason behind the call. It was exactly what I thought: money problems. I hadn't heard much about their business since I left, but I knew it wasn't doing well. Denise had mentioned something in passing about how their shop wasn't thriving the way they had expected, and with the pandemic, it made sense that they'd be struggling. But I wasn't going to jump in and save them, not after everything they had done to me. "Okay," and I said, my voice flat. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "Your sister, Claire, she's been managing things for us, but she started, and that's when I cut her off." "Let me guess," I said, already knowing where this was headed. "Claire screwed it all up." There was a long pause on her end, which was answer enough. Of course, Claire had messed it up. I don't know why they were surprised. She was always more interested in looking good than actually doing the hard work. They had put all their faith in her, and now it was backfiring. My mom let out a shaky breath. "Things haven't been going as planned," she admitted, "and we need help." I laughed, I couldn't help it. After everything, after throwing me out, cutting me off, letting Claire walk all over me, now they wanted my help. The audacity of it all was unreal. Unbelievable, I muttered under my breath. What's so funny? My mom asked, sounding genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why I wasn't jumping at the chance to swoop in and save the day. You're serious? You actually think I'm going to help you? I said, my voice rising. I could feel the anger bubbling up, all the emotions I'd been pushing down for the past 2 years coming to the surface. We're your parents, she said, her voice wavering. We made mistakes, but we need you. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You didn't just make mistakes, Mom. You kicked me out of the house. You believed Claire's lies over your own son. You haven't spoken to me in years, and now you need me. And suddenly I'm supposed to drop everything and come running. She was quiet after that. I could tell she didn't know what to say. She probably wasn't used to me standing up for myself like this. Back when I was still living at home, I would have just gone along with whatever they said, hoping it would keep the peace. But not anymore. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. Finally, she spoke, but her tone had changed. She wasn't trying to be all soft and caring anymore. Now she sounded irritated, like she couldn't believe I was being so difficult. We're still your family, she said sharply. You owe us at least that much. That was it. That was the final straw. I didn't owe them anything. In fact, they were the ones who owed me an apology for starters, but I wasn't holding my breath on that one. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said, my voice cold. If you need help, go ask Claire. She's your golden child, remember. Without waiting for her to respond, I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally said what I needed to say. They could figure out their mess on their own. I wasn't going to be part of it. That night, I called Aunt Denise and told her what happened. She wasn't surprised at all. They've been relying on Claire for years, she said. It was only a matter of time before it all caught up to them. We talked for a while, and by the end of the call I felt even more certain that I'd made the right decision. My parents had chosen Claire over me, and now they were paying the price. As harsh as it sounded, it wasn't my responsibility to fix their mistakes. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need their approval or their acceptance. I had my own life now, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their toxic mess. I had done my part by surviving their betrayal. Now, it was their turn to deal with the consequences. Update 1. I thought I was done with all the family drama after that phone call with my mom. Honestly, I felt pretty good about how things went. I had finally stood up for myself and made it clear that I wasn't going to be their safety net. I figured they'd just give up and go back to depending on Claire, but I underestimated my sister's ability to stir the pot. Because, of course, Claire wasn't going to let me get away that easily. It was about 2 weeks after the call with my mom when something weird happened. I was having a pretty normal Saturday afternoon, just cleaning up around my place, when I heard a knock on the door. Now, I don't really get visitors. I live alone, and most of my friends know to text before they come over, so I was a little confused. I peeked through the peephole, and guess who was standing outside? Yep, Claire. For a second I thought maybe I was seeing things. Like, what was she doing here? She hadn't spoken to me in years except for that one stupid text about my laptop, and now she was just showing up at my door like everything was fine. My gut reaction was to just ignore her, but I knew Claire well enough to know that she wouldn't leave until she got what she wanted. I opened the door, and before I could even say anything, she smiled like we were best friends or something. Hey, she said, all bubbly and fake. It's been a while. I just stared at her for a second, completely caught off guard. Yeah, it has. What are you doing here, Claire? She looked at me with this overly sweet expression, like she thought she could charm her way into my good graces. I wanted to talk, she said, tilting her head slightly. Can I come in? I crossed my arms, not moving from the doorway. About what? I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. Come on, can we just talk inside? It's important. I should have said no. I should have just told her to leave right then and there, but my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped aside and let her in, though I didn't bother making her feel welcome. I didn't offer her a seat, and I didn't ask if she wanted anything to drink. She was lucky I was even letting her into my space after everything she'd done. She walked in and looked around, like she was taking in the place. Nice apartment, she said, like she was trying to make small talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for pleasantries. Okay, Claire, I said, getting straight to the point. What do you want? She sighed dramatically like she was already exhausted from whatever game she was playing. Mom told me about your conversation, she said, folding her arms. She's pretty upset, you know. I raised an eyebrow. Upset she kicked me out of the house, Claire. What exactly does she have to be upset about? Claire rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. Look, I'm not here to rehash all that. We both know you've always been difficult. I almost laughed at how casually she said that. Difficult? I repeated. Are you serious right now? You fabricated emails to get me kicked out of the house. That's difficult. She waved her hand dismissively. That's ancient history. I came here because I want to make things right. I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. You want to make things right? I asked, skepticism dripping from every word. Yeah, she said, nodding like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. I know things got complicated with the family, and maybe I overreacted back then, but I think it's time to put all that behind us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You think you overreacted? I said, struggling to keep my voice even. Claire, you destroyed my relationship with our parents. You lied about me, manipulated them, and now you're standing here like none of that matters anymore. Her smile faded a little, and I could see that she was getting frustrated. I didn't come here to argue, okay? I came because I need your help. Ah, there it was, the real reason she was standing in my apartment. Of course, Claire wasn't here to apologize or to make amends. She needed something from me. I felt my jaw clenched as I stared at her, waiting for her to continue. I've been trying to keep the business going, she said, finally dropping the fake sweetness. But it's been really hard. The pandemic hit us pretty badly, and I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough. Mom and Dad don't want to admit it, but we're on the verge of losing everything. I crossed my arms, not feeling an ounce of sympathy. So let me guess, you want me to help bail you out? Claire shifted uncomfortably. I'm not asking for a handout, she said defensively. I just thought we could, I don't know, figure something out together. You're doing well for yourself, right? I figured you'd want to help the family. I couldn't believe her. She was trying to guilt-trip me into saving the family business that she had driven into the ground. You figured wrong, I said flatly. Claire blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Wait, what do you mean? I mean I'm not helping you, I said, my voice firm. Not after everything you did. You ruined my life, Claire. You turned my own parents against me. And now that you're in trouble, you think I'm just going to forget all of that and swoop in to save you? No. She stared at me dumbfounded. For the first time in her life, Claire didn't seem to know what to say. But we're family, she said weakly, her voice losing some of its confidence. I shook my head. We stopped being family the day you made it your mission to destroy me. Claire's face went pale. She wasn't used to hearing no, and I could tell she was struggling to process it. After a long, awkward silence, she stood up. Fine, she said coldly. If that's how you want it. That's how it's going to be, I said, standing my ground. You made your choices, Claire. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Without another word, she stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a minute, letting the tension drain out of me. Part of me felt bad, like maybe I was too harsh. But then I remembered everything she'd put me through, and that guilt faded fast. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. I wasn't living in Claire's shadow anymore. I wasn't the second choice or the scapegoat. I was finally free from all of it. Update 2. I thought that after Claire stormed out of my apartment, things would go quiet. Like she would finally get the message that I was done with her and the whole family drama. But of course, I underestimated just how stubborn she could be. It wasn't even a full week later when the next wave hit. And this time, it wasn't Claire knocking on my door. It was both my parents. It was a Saturday again. Funny how these things always seem to happen on my days off. I was just sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when the knock came. It wasn't soft, either. It was one of those heavy, insistent knocks that tells you whoever's on the other side isn't leaving anytime soon. I got up, already having a feeling about who it might be, and when I opened the door, there they were, my mom and dad, standing together like some kind of united front. My dad looked uncomfortable, like he didn't really want to be there. But my mom, she had that look in her eye, the one that said she was determined to fix whatever mess had been made, even if it meant bulldozing her way through. I sighed, leaning against the door frame. What do you want? My mom gave me a strained smile, trying to keep things friendly, I guess. Can we come in and talk? We need to sort some things out. I was tempted to slam the door in their faces, but part of me figured that if I didn't let them in now, they'd just keep showing up. So with an exaggerated sigh, I stepped aside and let them in. They walked in, glancing around the place like they were expecting something more than a basic apartment. My dad stayed quiet, but my mom went straight for the couch. Sitting down and patting the seat next to her like I was some little kid she was trying to console. "I'll stand," I said flatly, crossing my arms. "All right," she said with a tight smile. "Look, we know things have been difficult between us." "Difficult," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's what you're calling it." My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and gruff. "We didn't come here to argue. Then what did you come here for?" I asked, not even bothering to hide my frustration, because I'm pretty sure we've already been over everything. "Claire tried, you tried, and I made myself clear. I'm not helping." My mom smiled, wavered a little. She probably wasn't used to me talking back like this. "That's not why we're here," she said, leaning forward slightly. "We're here because we want to apologize." I almost laughed. "Apologize? For what exactly? Kicking me out? Believing Claire's lies? Or was it that you didn't even bother checking in on me for 2 years?" My mom's face tightened, and my dad shifted uncomfortably, looking like he wanted to be anywhere but here. It was clear they weren't expecting me to throw it back in their faces like that. "We know we made mistakes," my mom said, her voice quieter now. "But we're family, and family has to stick together." I could feel my patience wearing thin. This was just more of the same. Every time something went wrong, they'd pull out the family card like it was supposed to erase everything that happened. But I wasn't falling for it this time. "You guys are only here because you need something from me," I said bluntly. "If things hadn't gone south with the business, I wouldn't even be hearing from you. Let's not pretend this is about family." There was a moment of silence, and then my dad finally spoke up. His voice rough, but more honest than anything I'd heard from him in years. "You're right, that caught me off guard." I blinked, staring at him. "What?" "You're right," he repeated, sighing heavily. "We screwed up, we believed Claire, we pushed you out, and we didn't even think twice about it. And now, well, now things are falling apart and we're desperate." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting him to actually admit it. My mom, on the other hand, looked like she was trying not to lose her cool. Clearly, she hadn't planned for him to just lay it all out like that. "I appreciate the honesty," I said after a long pause, "but that doesn't change anything." My mom cut in then, her voice sharper. "It doesn't change the fact that we need you and you owe us, after everything we've done for you." And there it was again, that sense of entitlement. They really believed I owed them something just because they were my parents. Like all the years of neglect and favoritism didn't matter, and now that they were in trouble, I was supposed to bail them out. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice cold. "Not after the way you treated me. You made your choice when you believed Claire over me, when you threw me out and didn't even check if I was okay. Now you want me to save you? That's not how this works." My dad didn't say anything. He just sat there staring at the floor like he was ashamed. But my mom, she wasn't done yet. "We're your parents," she said, her voice rising. "We raised you, we took care of you, and now you're just going to abandon us." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for her at this point. "You didn't take care of me, Aunt Denise did. You chose Claire, and now you're stuck with her. That's on you." My mom looked like she was about to explode, but my dad put a hand on her arm, stopping her from saying whatever was about to come out of her mouth. He stood up, looking me in the eye for the first time since they walked in. "We understand," he said, his voice steady but sad. "We're not going to push you anymore. We just needed to try." For a second I almost felt bad for him, but then I remembered everything they had put me through, and that sympathy disappeared. "I hope you figure it out," I said, stepping toward the door and opening it for them, "but I'm not going to be part of it." My dad nodded like he'd expected that. My mom, though, gave me one last look, half angry, half pleading, but when she saw I wasn't budging, she stood up and followed him out. As they left, I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in. I'd done it, I had finally stood up to them, and for the first time it felt like I was really free. Story 7 parents kicked me out just because the golden child sister couldn't stand me. 10 years ago, my life basically got flipped upside down because my family, especially my sister Claire, decided to kick me out of the house. And why? Because they thought I was some sort of traitor for figuring out how to pay for my college tuition without their help. I was 18, just about to start college, and suddenly I found myself with nowhere to go. This all happened thanks to Claire, the golden child who always managed to make me look like I was barely worth anything in comparison. Claire is 4 years older than me, and from the time we were kids it was clear that she was the favorite. Like, not just a little bit. I mean, my parents were obsessed with her. If she got an A, they'd throw her a freaking parade. But if I got an A, it was like, oh cool, what's for dinner? You get the idea. So I kind of grew up with the mentality that it didn't matter what I did because Claire would always outshine me. By the time she went off to a top business school, my parents were all over it, like she was some sort of prodigy. They paid for everything, her tuition, her apartment, her fancy clothes. Meanwhile, I kept my head down and figured I'd have to do things on my own. So when I got accepted into a reputable college in the UK to study history, I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd get a little bit of support. But nope, that wasn't happening. My parents straight up told me they couldn't afford my tuition, which, okay, I get it, college is expensive. But what really pissed me off was that they didn't even want to cosign a loan. I wasn't asking them to pay the whole thing just to help me out so I wouldn't be drowning in debt my whole life. But they refused and we fought about it a lot. Their reasoning: we already paid for Claire's college, we have to think about our future now. Oh, and they were also planning to start some kind of small business around that time. So apparently all their savings were going into that. I was completely stuck. I didn't want to lose the opportunity to go to this college, but it felt like my parents were just throwing obstacles in my way for no reason. They had no problem spending tons of money on Claire, but when it came to me, suddenly they had to be frugal and responsible. I needed help, and it became pretty obvious that they weren't going to give it to me. So, with no other options, I turned to my Aunt Denise. Now Denise is my dad's older sister, and let me just say, she's like the total opposite of my parents. She's a neurosurgeon and honestly way more successful than either of them, but she's also super down to earth. My parents always had this weird tension with her. They'd act all polite at family gatherings, but I could tell they were bitter about how successful she was compared to them. My dad, in particular, hated feeling like she overshadowed him. I didn't really want to get her involved at first, but I was desperate. I reached out to her one day, asking if she'd be willing to help me with the tuition. She didn't even hesitate. She was like, "Of course I'll help. Why didn't you come to me sooner?" But I was terrified that my dad would find out. If he knew I had gone behind his back to ask for money from his sister, he'd lose his mind. So I begged Denise to keep it a secret. Things were fine for a while after that. I figured I was in the clear. My tuition was covered, and I was getting ready to leave for school. That's when Claire decided to ruin everything. To this day, I still don't know how she found out about me asking Aunt Denise for help, but she did. And being Claire, she couldn't just let it go. She had to blow it up into this huge, dramatic thing. One night I came home after hanging out with some friends, and immediately I knew something was off. All my stuff was packed up in boxes. Everything. My clothes, my books, even my bedding. My parents were sitting in the living room, and Claire was standing there with this smug, self-satisfied look on her face. It felt like I had walked into some twisted intervention. My dad didn't waste any time. He threw a stack of papers at me and said, "Explain this." I had no idea what he was talking about, so I looked at the papers, and that's when I realized Claire had gone full psycho. She had fabricated these fake emails between me and Aunt Denise, where it looked like I was betraying the family, leaking details about the business my parents were planning to start, in exchange for Aunt Denise paying for my tuition. I couldn't believe my eyes. Claire had gone through my laptop, found some emails between me and Denise, and then doctored them using Photoshop or whatever. She made it look like I had sold out our family. I was stunned. I tried to explain that it was all fake, but my parents didn't even listen. They just stood there saying, "We trusted you and you stabbed us in the back." It didn't matter what I said. They believed Claire because of course they did. They always believed her. It was like I didn't even exist anymore. They told me to pack my things and leave right then and there. I was officially kicked out of the house because of a complete lie. I begged them to reconsider. I didn't want to be a burden on Aunt Denise, especially after she had already agreed to pay for my tuition. But my parents didn't care. They said I was a traitor and they wanted nothing to do with me. So that was it. I left with nothing but the clothes on my back and a few boxes of my stuff, and I moved in with Aunt Denise. Honestly, I don't know how I would have survived if it weren't for her. She took me in without a second thought and treated me like actual family, something I hadn't felt in years. While my parents were busy worshiping Claire and focusing on their future business, Denise was the only one who really cared about me. And for that, I'll always be grateful. But to this day, I can't shake the memory of that night. Walking into my house and seeing all my stuff packed up, my parents staring at me like I was a criminal, and Claire standing there with that smug look on her face, knowing she had won. So there I was, kicked out of my own house, standing on Aunt Denise's doorstep with my life in boxes. I was still processing what the hell had just happened. It felt like a bad dream. I mean, how do you go from thinking you're part of a family to being homeless in one night? The whole thing was so surreal, but at the same time I couldn't say I was that surprised. My parents had always made it clear that Claire came first, but I guess I never thought they'd take it this far. Denise, being the angel that she is, welcomed me with open arms. She didn't ask a million questions. She didn't pry. She just saw that I was hurting and told me that her house was my house for as long as I needed. That kind of kindness. Man, it hit me right in the gut because I realized right then that I had never felt anything close to that for my own parents. So, I moved in with her. It was strange at first, waking up in her guest room, looking around at a house that wasn't mine, but over time, it started to feel more like home than the place I grew up in ever had. We started getting closer, talking more about everything. Turns out, Aunt Denise knew a lot more about my parents and their BS than I ever realized. She'd been keeping her distance from them for years, only showing up to family events because she felt obligated. She told me something that blew my mind. Apparently, my dad's grudge against her started way before I was born. Denise had always been more successful. She went to med school, got married to a great guy, who unfortunately passed away young and was living her life. Meanwhile, my dad was doing okay, but every time they met up, he'd get weirdly competitive. Denise said that their relationship basically became a game of who could look better to the rest of the family, but instead of just being proud of his sister, he resented her. And it wasn't just career stuff. My dad felt overshadowed in every way, financially, socially, everything. I guess that jealousy bled over into how he treated me. Denise had figured all this out years ago, but kept quiet because she didn't want to make things worse for me. Now that I was living with her, though, she told me everything. It was like she was trying to fill in all the gaps in my life that I hadn't been able to make sense of before. Why my parents never seemed to care about what I did, why they always bent over backward for Claire, it all boiled down to some weird family dynamic that I didn't even know existed. Living with Denise was great, but the thing is, I couldn't completely relax. I kept waiting for my parents to call, for Claire to show up out of nowhere, or for them to apologize for what they did. But of course, that never happened. Days turned into weeks and nothing, not a single text, not a single call. At first I was angry, like really angry. How could they just toss me aside like I was nothing? Then the anger kind of faded and I started to feel numb about the whole thing. It was like my brain was shutting off all my emotions just so I could function. Denise, though, she was amazing. She never pushed me to talk about what happened unless I wanted to. She let me take my time figuring things out. She even helped me get all my stuff sorted for school, making sure I had everything I needed before I left for the UK. I swear, if it weren't for her, I don't know how I would have gotten through that time. But even with her support, the silence from my parents was deafening. You'd think after kicking your kid out, you'd at least check up on them, right? But no, I guess I shouldn't have expected anything different, but I still did. One afternoon, about a month after the whole ordeal, I got a text from Claire. I remember it so clearly because it was just as obnoxious as she was. All it said was, "Hope you're doing okay. By the way, don't leave your laptop lying around." That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she had done. Just a little smirk in text form reminding me that she was the one who got me thrown out. I stared at the screen, feeling my blood boil. She was taunting me, plain and simple. I didn't respond. What was the point? Claire wasn't the type to feel guilty about anything. In her mind, she had won some weird family game, and that was that. I thought about texting back something snarky, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She'd just get off on it. So I blocked her number and tried to move on. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at my phone, part of me was still waiting for something from my parents. Maybe a message from my mom, saying she regretted everything, or even a passive-aggressive email from my dad, pretending like nothing happened. But nope, radio silence. In the months that followed, Denise and I got into a solid routine. She became more than just my aunt. She became my confidant, my friend, and basically the only family I had left. I started to see how messed up my parents really were. They'd spent so long focusing on Claire, trying to mold her into some perfect daughter, that they completely missed out on everything else. And when Claire finally messed up, which she eventually would, it would be too late for them to fix it. Around the time I was getting ready to leave for school, I got another message. This time from my dad. It was short and direct. Good luck in the UK. That was it. No apology, no explanation, nothing. It felt like a slap in the face. After everything, all he had to say was good luck. I didn't even know how to respond, so I didn't. I just deleted the message and tried not to think about it. The day I left for the UK, Denise drove me to the airport. She hugged me and told me how proud she was, how she knew I'd do great things. It was the first time in my life that someone in my family had said those words to me, and it hit me harder than I expected. I got on that plane feeling like I was leaving more than just my home behind. I was leaving behind the part of me that had always tried to seek approval from my parents. From that moment on, I decided I didn't need them anymore. I had Denise, I had my future, and I had myself. If they wanted to reach out, fine. But I wasn't going to waste any more energy chasing after people who clearly didn't care about me. I was done. So life in the UK was going great. I settled into college, made some friends, and for the first time in years, I wasn't constantly thinking about my family. I won't say I forgot about them. I don't think that's possible, but they definitely weren't on my mind as much anymore. I was focused on my studies, figuring out my future, and just trying to enjoy life without the drama that came with living under my parents' shadow. But of course, just when things were going smoothly, something had to come and mess it up. I finished college and I came back to my city. I found a very good high-paying job, and then I got a call from my mom. Yeah, my mom. The same woman who hadn't spoken to me since the day they kicked me out. It was totally unexpected. I was sitting in my dorm room going over some notes for a paper when my phone buzzed. I saw her name pop up, and for a second I thought I was seeing things. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Should I answer it? Ignore it? After everything that had happened, why would she be calling me now? I let it ring a few more times, and then against my better judgment I picked up. "Hello?" I said, trying to sound calm even though my heart was pounding. There was a pause on the other end, like she wasn't sure what to say. Finally, she spoke. "Hi, it's your mother." "No kidding, who else would it be?" I didn't say that, though. I just stayed quiet, waiting for her to explain why she was calling after almost 2 years of nothing. She hesitated again, and then out of nowhere she said, "We need to talk." I couldn't help but scoff. Now she wanted to talk. After everything, it was so typical of her. But even though I was annoyed, a part of me was curious. What could possibly be so important that she was reaching out after all this time? "About what?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "Well, your father and I, we want to see you," she said, stumbling over her words like she was trying to figure out how to phrase it right. I could already tell where this was going. They didn't actually want to see me because they missed me or felt bad for kicking me out. There was something they needed, and I had a pretty good guess about what it was. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "Why?" I asked bluntly. She didn't answer right away, which pretty much confirmed my suspicions. When she finally did speak, her voice was quieter, like she was trying to sound all motherly and concerned. "Your dad and I, we've been going through a hard time. Things haven't been easy since the pandemic." There it was, the real reason behind the call. It was exactly what I thought: money problems. I hadn't heard much about their business since I left, but I knew it wasn't doing well. Denise had mentioned something in passing about how their shop wasn't thriving the way they had expected, and with the pandemic, it made sense that they'd be struggling. But I wasn't going to jump in and save them, not after everything they had done to me. "Okay," and I said, my voice flat. I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "Your sister, Claire, she's been managing things for us, but she started, and that's when I cut her off. Let me guess, I said, already knowing where this was headed. Claire screwed it all up. There was a long pause on her end, which was answer enough. Of course, Claire had messed it up. I don't know why they were surprised. She was always more interested in looking good than actually doing the hard work. They had put all their faith in her, and now it was backfiring. My mom let out a shaky breath. Things haven't been going as planned, she admitted, and we need help. I laughed, I couldn't help it. After everything, after throwing me out, cutting me off, letting Claire walk all over me, now they wanted my help. The audacity of it all was unreal. Unbelievable, I muttered under my breath. What's so funny, my mom asked, sounding genuinely confused, like she couldn't understand why I wasn't jumping at the chance to swoop in and save the day. You're serious? You actually think I'm going to help you? I said, my voice rising. I could feel the anger bubbling up, all the emotions I'd been pushing down for the past 2 years coming to the surface. We're your parents, she said, her voice wavering. We made mistakes, but we need you. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. You didn't just make mistakes, Mom. You kicked me out of the house. You believed Claire's lies over your own son. You haven't spoken to me in years, and now you need me. And suddenly I'm supposed to drop everything and come running. She was quiet after that. I could tell she didn't know what to say. She probably wasn't used to me standing up for myself like this. Back when I was still living at home, I would have just gone along with whatever they said, hoping it would keep the peace. But not anymore. I had changed, and I wasn't going to let them walk all over me again. Finally, she spoke, but her tone had changed. She wasn't trying to be all soft and caring anymore. Now she sounded irritated, like she couldn't believe I was being so difficult. We're still your family, she said sharply. You owe us at least that much. That was it. That was the final straw. I didn't owe them anything. In fact, they were the ones who owed me an apology for starters, but I wasn't holding my breath on that one. I don't owe you a damn thing, I said, my voice cold. If you need help, go ask Claire. She's your golden child, remember. Without waiting for her to respond, I hung up the phone. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. I had finally said what I needed to say. They could figure out their mess on their own. I wasn't going to be part of it. That night, I called Aunt Denise and told her what happened. She wasn't surprised at all. They've been relying on Claire for years, she said. It was only a matter of time before it all caught up to them. We talked for a while, and by the end of the call I felt even more certain that I'd made the right decision. My parents had chosen Claire over me, and now they were paying the price. As harsh as it sounded, it wasn't my responsibility to fix their mistakes. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't need their approval or their acceptance. I had my own life now, and I wasn't about to let them drag me back into their toxic mess. I had done my part by surviving their betrayal. Now, it was their turn to deal with the consequences. Update 1. I thought I was done with all the family drama after that phone call with my mom. Honestly, I felt pretty good about how things went. I had finally stood up for myself and made it clear that I wasn't going to be their safety net. I figured they'd just give up and go back to depending on Claire, but I underestimated my sister's ability to stir the pot. Because, of course, Claire wasn't going to let me get away that easily. It was about 2 weeks after the call with my mom when something weird happened. I was having a pretty normal Saturday afternoon, just cleaning up around my place, when I heard a knock on the door. Now, I don't really get visitors. I live alone, and most of my friends know to text before they come over, so I was a little confused. I peeked through the peephole, and guess who was standing outside? Yep, Claire. For a second I thought maybe I was seeing things. Like, what was she doing here? She hadn't spoken to me in years except for that one stupid text about my laptop, and now she was just showing up at my door like everything was fine. My gut reaction was to just ignore her, but I knew Claire well enough to know that she wouldn't leave until she got what she wanted. I opened the door, and before I could even say anything, she smiled like we were best friends or something. Hey, she said, all bubbly and fake. It's been a while. I just stared at her for a second, completely caught off guard. Yeah, it has. What are you doing here, Claire? She looked at me with this overly sweet expression, like she thought she could charm her way into my good graces. I wanted to talk, she said, tilting her head slightly. Can I come in? I crossed my arms, not moving from the doorway. About what? I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. Her smile faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly. Come on, can we just talk inside? It's important. I should have said no. I should have just told her to leave right then and there, but my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped aside and let her in, though I didn't bother making her feel welcome. I didn't offer her a seat, and I didn't ask if she wanted anything to drink. She was lucky I was even letting her into my space after everything she'd done. She walked in and looked around, like she was taking in the place. "Nice apartment," she said, like she was trying to make small talk. I didn't respond. I wasn't here for pleasantries. "Okay, Claire," I said, getting straight to the point. "What do you want?" She sighed dramatically, like she was already exhausted from whatever game she was playing. "Mom told me about your conversation," she said, folding her arms. "She's pretty upset, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Upset she kicked me out of the house, Claire." "What exactly does she have to be upset about?" Claire rolled her eyes like I was the one being unreasonable. "Look, I'm not here to rehash all that. We both know you've always been difficult." I almost laughed at how casually she said that. "Difficult?" I repeated. "Are you serious right now? You fabricated emails to get me kicked out of the house. That's difficult." She waved her hand dismissively. "That's ancient history. I came here because I want to make things right." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "You want to make things right?" I asked, skepticism dripping from every word. "Yeah," she said, nodding like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. "I know things got complicated with the family, and maybe I overreacted back then, but I think it's time to put all that behind us." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You think you overreacted?" I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "Claire, you destroyed my relationship with our parents. You lied about me, manipulated them, and now you're standing here like none of that matters anymore." Her smile faded a little, and I could see that she was getting frustrated. "I didn't come here to argue, okay? I came because I need your help." Ah, there it was, the real reason she was standing in my apartment. Of course, Claire wasn't here to apologize or to make amends. She needed something from me. I felt my jaw clenched as I stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "I've been trying to keep the business going," she said, finally dropping the fake sweetness. "But it's been really hard. The pandemic hit us pretty badly, and I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough. Mom and Dad don't want to admit it, but we're on the verge of losing everything." I crossed my arms, not feeling an ounce of sympathy. "So let me guess, you want me to help bail you out?" Claire shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not asking for a handout," she said defensively. "I just thought we could, I don't know, figure something out together. You're doing well for yourself, right? I figured you'd want to help the family." I couldn't believe her. She was trying to guilt-trip me into saving the family business that she had driven into the ground. "You figured wrong," I said flatly. Claire blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I mean I'm not helping you," I said, my voice firm. "Not after everything you did. You ruined my life, Claire. You turned my own parents against me. And now that you're in trouble, you think I'm just going to forget all of that and swoop in to save you?" "No." She stared at me dumbfounded. For the first time in her life, Claire didn't seem to know what to say. "But we're family," she said weakly, her voice losing some of its confidence. I shook my head. "We stopped being family the day you made it your mission to destroy me." Claire's face went pale. She wasn't used to hearing no, and I could tell she was struggling to process it. After a long, awkward silence, she stood up. "Fine," she said coldly. "If that's how you want it." "That's how it's going to be," I said, standing my ground. "You made your choices, Claire. Now you have to deal with the consequences." Without another word, she stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a minute, letting the tension drain out of me. Part of me felt bad, like maybe I was too harsh. But then I remembered everything she'd put me through, and that guilt faded fast. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control over my life. I wasn't living in Claire's shadow anymore. I wasn't the second choice or the scapegoat. I was finally free from all of it. Update 2. I thought that after Claire stormed out of my apartment, things would go quiet. Like she would finally get the message that I was done with her and the whole family drama. But of course, I underestimated just how stubborn she could be. It wasn't even a full week later when the next wave hit. And this time, it wasn't Claire knocking on my door. It was both my parents. It was a Saturday again. Funny how these things always seem to happen on my days off. I was just sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when the knock came. It wasn't soft, either. It was one of those heavy, insistent knocks that tells you whoever's on the other side isn't leaving anytime soon. I got up, already having a feeling about who it might be. And when I opened the door, there they were, my mom and dad, standing together like some kind of united front. My dad looked uncomfortable, like he didn't really want to be there. But my mom, she had that look in her eye, the one that said she was determined to fix whatever mess had been made, even if it meant bulldozing her way through. I sighed, leaning against the door frame. "What do you want?" My mom gave me a strained smile, trying to keep things friendly, I guess. "Can we come in and talk? We need to sort some things out." I was tempted to slam the door in their faces, but part of me figured that if I didn't let them in now, they'd just keep showing up. So with an exaggerated sigh, I stepped aside and let them in. They walked in, glancing around the place like they were expecting something more than a basic apartment. My dad stayed quiet, but my mom went straight for the couch, sitting down and patting the seat next to her like I was some little kid she was trying to console. "I'll stand," I said flatly, crossing my arms. "All right," she said with a tight smile. "Look, we know things have been difficult between us." "Difficult," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's what you're calling it." My dad finally spoke up, his voice low and gruff. "We didn't come here to argue." "Then what did you come here for?" I asked, not even bothering to hide my frustration, because I'm pretty sure we've already been over everything. "Claire tried, you tried, and I made myself clear. I'm not helping." My mom smiled, wavered a little. She probably wasn't used to me talking back like this. "That's not why we're here," she said, leaning forward slightly. "We're here because we want to apologize." I almost laughed. "Apologize? For what exactly?" "Kicking me out. Believing Claire's lies? Or was it that you didn't even bother checking in on me for 2 years?" My mom's face tightened, and my dad shifted uncomfortably, looking like he wanted to be anywhere but here. It was clear they weren't expecting me to throw it back in their faces like that. "We know we made mistakes," my mom said, her voice quieter now. "But we're family, and family has to stick together." I could feel my patience wearing thin. This was just more of the same. Every time something went wrong, they'd pull out the family card like it was supposed to erase everything that happened. But I wasn't falling for it this time. "You guys are only here because you need something from me," I said bluntly. "If things hadn't gone south with the business, I wouldn't even be hearing from you. Let's not pretend this is about family." There was a moment of silence, and then my dad finally spoke up. His voice rough, but more honest than anything I'd heard from him in years. "You're right," that caught me off guard. I blinked, staring at him. "What?" "You're right," he repeated, sighing heavily. "We screwed up, we believed Claire, we pushed you out, and we didn't even think twice about it. And now, well, now things are falling apart and we're desperate." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting him to actually admit it. My mom, on the other hand, looked like she was trying not to lose her cool. Clearly, she hadn't planned for him to just lay it all out like that. "I appreciate the honesty," I said after a long pause, "but that doesn't change anything." My mom cut in then, her voice sharper. "It doesn't change the fact that we need you and you owe us, after everything we've done for you." And there it was again, that sense of entitlement. They really believed I owed them something just because they were my parents. Like all the years of neglect and favoritism didn't matter, and now that they were in trouble, I was supposed to bail them out. "I don't owe you anything," I said, my voice cold. "Not after the way you treated me. You made your choice when you believed Claire over me, when you threw me out and didn't even check if I was okay. Now you want me to save you. That's not how this works." My dad didn't say anything. He just sat there staring at the floor like he was ashamed. But my mom, she wasn't done yet. "We're your parents," she said, her voice rising. "We raised you, we took care of you, and now you're just going to abandon us." I shook my head, almost feeling sorry for her at this point. "You didn't take care of me, Aunt Denise did. You chose Claire, and now you're stuck with her. That's on you." My mom looked like she was about to explode, but my dad put a hand on her arm, stopping her from saying whatever was about to come out of her mouth. He stood up, looking me in the eye for the first time since they walked in. "We understand," he said, his voice steady but sad. "We're not going to push you anymore. We just needed to try." For a second I almost felt bad for him, but then I remembered everything they had put me through, and that sympathy disappeared. "I hope you figure it out," I said, stepping toward the door and opening it for them, "but I'm not going to be part of it." My dad nodded like he'd expected that. My mom, though, gave me one last look, half angry, half pleading, but when she saw I wasn't budging, she stood up and followed him out. As they left, I closed the door behind them and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle in. I'd done it, I had finally stood up to them, and for the first time it felt like I was really free. Story 8. My sister stole my promotion and my fiancé, so I exposed her fake charity scam at our parents' anniversary party. I never thought I'd be writing this. But I need to get this off my chest because I'm questioning everything I thought I knew about my family. 3 weeks ago, I discovered something that shattered my entire world, and now I'm planning something that might make me the villain in everyone else's story. My name is Victoria, I'm 32, and I work as Senior Marketing Director at my family's advertising firm, Blackwood and Associates. My younger sister Maya is 28, and she's always been the golden child Harvard graduate, runs a children's cancer charity, has 500K Instagram followers. Everyone adores her. I'm the responsible one who stayed home to help build the business while she traveled the world finding herself. 2 months ago, our parents promised me the creative director position. I've been working toward it for 8 years, putting in 60-hour weeks, sacrificing my social life. Then suddenly, they gave it to Maya instead. Their reasoning: I'm too emotionally unstable for leadership responsibilities. They showed me therapy receipts supposedly proving I'd been seeking treatment for anxiety and depression. I'd never seen those receipts before in my life. That's when things started unraveling. My fiancé James, who's a lawyer, became distant and secretive. He'd disappear for hours, claiming work emergencies. Last month, I found a burner phone in his jacket pocket. The messages made my stomach drop. Maya, can't wait to see you tonight. Tora is working late again. James, she has no idea. After the anniversary party, we can finally be together. Maya, poor Tora. She really thinks she deserves that promotion. There were months of messages. They'd been planning this entire thing. Maya had convinced our parents I was unstable by forging those therapy documents. She'd been sleeping with my fiancé for 6 months. But the worst part, I kept reading. The charity Maya runs, Hope for Little Heroes, raises money for children with cancer. Except the financial records on that phone showed something horrifying. She's been embezzling donations to fund her luxury lifestyle. Designer bags, expensive vacations, bribes to company board members, all paid for with money meant for dying children. I spent 3 sleepless nights going through everything. Bank transfers, fake medical records, even photos of sick children she'd stolen from other charity websites. She'd built her entire reputation on the suffering of families who trusted her with their last hope. Here's where I might be the asshole. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to wait. Our parents' 30th wedding anniversary party is this weekend. 200 guests from high society, all the people who worship Maya as this perfect angel of mercy. I'm going to expose everything in front of everyone. I've copied all the evidence, contacted the families whose children's photos she stole, even reached out to an investigative journalist. I want to destroy her the same way she tried to destroy me. I want everyone to see who she really is, but I keep thinking about my parents. This will humiliate them. Their golden child will go to prison. Their business reputation might not survive the scandal. James will lose his law license. Maya's charity donors will lose faith in all charitable organizations. My best friend Rachel thinks I'm doing the right thing. She's a pediatric nurse who's seen children die from the same cancers Maya claims to fight against. She says those families deserve justice. My Aunt Dorothy, who never liked Maya, is helping me plan everything. But everyone else thinks Maya walks on water. The anniversary party is in 4 days. I have hotel reservations, a speech prepared, an FBI financial crimes unit on standby. Maya has no idea what's coming. She's been posting on Instagram about how excited she is to celebrate family love and loyalty. I could still back down. I could confront them privately, maybe work out some kind of arrangement. But every time I think about those sick children, about the families who donated their rent money believing they were helping save lives, I get angry all over again. So Reddit, am I the asshole for planning to destroy my sister's life in front of our entire family? She stole everything from me, but everyone thinks she's an angel. Part of me wonders if I'm just as manipulative as she is for planning this public humiliation. But another part of me thinks some people deserve to fall from grace exactly as publicly as they built their fake pedestals. What would you do? We will talk in the next update. Update 1. Reddit, I'm back with an update that somehow made this situation even more twisted than I originally thought. The anniversary party is this weekend, and what I've discovered in the past 2 weeks has convinced me that Maya isn't just an opportunistic thief, she's been orchestrating this for years. First, thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. Reading your comments gave me the strength to keep digging instead of backing down. Several of you suggested hiring a private investigator, so I did. What Detective Morrison found made my blood run cold. Maya's charity scam isn't just about stealing donations. She's been running a sophisticated operation with multiple fake identities across 3 states. The Hope for Little Heroes charity is registered in Delaware, but she's also operating Angels for Children in Nevada and Miracle Kids Foundation in Florida. Same fake photos of sick children, same heartbreaking stories, different bank accounts. We're talking about over $2 million stolen from families who were already drowning in medical bills. But here's the part that really got to me. Detective Morrison traced some of the donations back to their sources. One family, the Hendersons, sold their house and moved into a trailer to donate $50,000 after their daughter Emma died of leukemia. They believed Maya's charity would help other children avoid their tragedy. Emma's photo is still on Maya's website, listed as a success story who's now cancer-free and thriving. Emma has been dead for 3 years. I called Mrs. Henderson. She cried when I told her what Maya had done. She said they'd been living on food stamps, believing their sacrifice had meaning. That phone call broke something inside me. This isn't about revenge anymore, it's about justice for people like the Hendersons. The investigation also revealed how deep James's involvement goes. His law firm, Rodriguez and Associates, has been laundering Maya's stolen money through fake legal settlements. They created fictional clients with cancer-related lawsuits, then settled these cases by transferring charity funds into James's trust accounts. He's not just cheating on me, he's a full partner in defrauding cancer families. I also learned more about Maya's manipulation tactics with our parents. She didn't just forge those therapy receipts about me. She's been systematically undermining my credibility for 2 years. She hired an actor to call our parents pretending to be my therapist, expressing concern about my mental state. She planted prescription bottles in my desk at work. She even staged a fake panic attack at a family dinner, then blamed me for triggering her stress. My parents aren't just innocent victims here either. When I confronted them with some of the evidence, they admitted they'd had concerns about Maya's charity but chose to ignore them because it brought prestige to our family name. Dad actually said, "Sometimes you have to overlook small irregularities for the greater good." Small irregularities, $2 million stolen from grieving families. The anniversary party planning has become surreal. Maya keeps texting me about her speech, how she wants to honor the family legacy of helping others. She's planning to announce her engagement to James during the toast. She even asked me to be her maid of honor, saying she knows this has been hard for me, but she hopes I can find happiness for them. I've been working with investigative journalist Sarah Chen, who's planning to livestream the entire confrontation. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit will have agents stationed around the venue. We've contacted every family whose children's photos Maya stole, and 12 of them are flying in to attend the party. Mrs. Henderson will be there, wearing a locket with Emma's photo. My friend Rachel has been incredible through all this. She's helped me document everything, even reached out to her contacts at Children's Hospital to verify which kids in Maya's photos are real patients versus stock photos. Rachel lost 2 patients to the same type of leukemia Maya claims to cure, so this is personal for her too. Aunt Dorothy, bless her heart, has been my secret weapon. Turns out she's been suspicious of Maya for years but never had proof. She's a retired federal judge, so she knows exactly how to handle evidence preservation. She's also been feeding Maya false information about my mental health struggles to keep her overconfident. The hardest part has been maintaining normal relationships while knowing what I know. Maya called me yesterday, crying about wedding stress, asking for my advice on flowers. James brought me coffee this morning and kissed my forehead, telling me he loves me. I wanted to scream, but I keep thinking about Emma Henderson, about all the children whose suffering Maya has monetized. I think about the families who went bankrupt believing they were saving lives. Maya has built her entire identity on their pain, and she's been celebrated for it. The party is in 3 days. Maya has no idea what's coming. She posted on Instagram yesterday, "Can't wait to celebrate 30 years of love with my amazing family. Sometimes the best surprises come when you least expect them. Blessed family love grateful." She has no idea how right she is about surprises. I'll update you all after this weekend. Wish me luck, Reddit. I'm about to find out if the truth really does set you free or if it just burns everything down. Update 2. Reddit, I'm writing this from my lawyer's office at 2 a.m. because the last 48 hours have been absolutely insane. Maya somehow figured out I was investigating her, and she decided to strike first. What happened yesterday was so calculated and vicious that I'm honestly impressed by her strategic thinking, even while I'm terrified of what she's capable of. 2 days ago, I noticed Maya acting strange. She kept asking weird questions about my work schedule, whether I'd been feeling okay lately, if I'd been taking any new medications. I should have realized she was fishing for information, but I was so focused on finalizing plans for the anniversary party that I didn't see it coming. Yesterday morning, I walked into what I thought was a normal family breakfast. Instead, I found my parents, James, Maya, and Dr. Patricia Wells, a psychiatrist I'd never met, all sitting around our dining room table looking at me with those concerned, pitying expressions that make your skin crawl. "Sweetheart," Mom said, "we need to talk about getting you some help." Maya had spent the previous week building a case that I was having a complete mental breakdown. She told our parents I'd been calling her at all hours, making paranoid accusations about her charity and her relationship with James. She produced text messages I'd supposedly sent her, threatening to destroy her life and claiming she was stealing from sick children. The messages looked exactly like my writing style, but I never sent them. She'd also somehow gotten hold of prescription bottles with my name on them: anxiety medication, antipsychotics, sleeping pills. She told everyone she'd found them hidden in my office desk and was worried about an overdose. The bottles were real prescriptions, filled at pharmacies I'd never visited, with a doctor's signature I'd never seen. Dr. Wells explained that Maya had contacted her, expressing concern about my deteriorating mental state. She had documentation of my supposed delusions, including my belief that Maya was running a fake charity and seducing my fiancé. She recommended immediate inpatient psychiatric treatment for my own safety. James, my own fiancé, sat there nodding along. He told everyone he'd been walking on eggshells around me, that I'd accused him of cheating with no evidence, that he was scared I might hurt myself or others. He had legal papers, ready documents to have me declared mentally incompetent, giving him power of attorney over my assets. I realized this wasn't just about discrediting me. Maya needed me legally incapacitated before the anniversary party. If I was committed to a psychiatric facility, I couldn't expose her. If James had power of attorney, he could access all my evidence and destroy it. That's when Aunt Dorothy saved my life. "Well," she said, walking into the dining room with a cup of coffee, "this is fascinating. Patricia, dear, do you always make house calls for involuntary commitments?" Turns out, Aunt Dorothy had been recording everything from the kitchen. She'd suspected Maya might try something like this, so she'd been documenting our family interactions for weeks. She also recognized Dr. Wells. They'd worked together on a case years ago where Wells had her license temporarily suspended for falsifying psychiatric evaluations. "Dorothy," Maya said, her voice tight, "Tori needs help. We're trying to save her life. Are you?" Dorothy pulled out her phone and played back Maya's voice from the recording. "If we can get her committed by Thursday, she won't be able to cause problems at the party. James can handle her finances and we can control the narrative." The room went dead silent. Maya's perfect mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes that I'd never noticed before. "You're recording us?" Mom asked, looking hurt. "I'm protecting my niece from a sociopath," Dorothy replied calmly. "Patricia, I believe your license is still under review by the state board. I wonder how they'd feel about this little performance." Dr. Wells left immediately. James started backtracking, claiming he was just trying to help, that maybe he'd misunderstood the situation. Maya switched tactics, suddenly becoming the concerned sister again. Tori, I'm sorry if this felt like an ambush. I'm just worried about you. These accusations you've been making about my charity, about James and me, they're not based in reality. I love you, and I want to help you get better. I looked around the room at these people I'd trusted my entire life. My parents, who were willing to have me committed based on Maya's lies. James, who was ready to steal my assets and betray everything we'd built together. Maya, who could lie with such conviction that she almost had me questioning my own sanity. The anniversary party is tomorrow, I said quietly. I'll be there. Maya's smile faltered. Maybe you should rest instead. You've been under so much stress. I wouldn't miss it for the world. After everyone left, Dorothy and I spent the evening reviewing our evidence one more time. She'd been building her own case against Maya, using her legal connections to verify the charity fraud. She also revealed something that made my blood boil. Maya had tried to have me committed once before, 2 years ago, but Dorothy had blocked it by threatening to expose Maya's first charity scam. She's been planning this for years, Tori. You were always the threat to her perfect image. The responsible one, the one who actually worked for everything she had. She needed you out of the way to fully take over the family business and reputation. We've moved the timeline up. Instead of waiting for Maya's speech tomorrow night, we're going to expose everything during the cocktail hour, when all the guests are still sober enough to understand what they're hearing. Sarah Chen will be live streaming from multiple angles. The FBI agents are already in position. Maya texted me an hour ago. I'm so glad we worked things out today. Family is everything. Tomorrow will be perfect. She has no idea that 12 families whose children she exploited are already checked into hotels nearby. Mrs. Henderson brought Emma's medical records and death certificate. The Rodriguezes brought photos of their son Miguel, whose image Maya used to raise $200,000 for a life-saving surgery that never happened because Miguel had already been dead for 5 years. I'm not sleeping tonight. Tomorrow, either Maya goes down or I do. But after what happened today, after seeing how far she's willing to go to destroy me, I know there's no going back. The anniversary party is in 18 hours. Maya thinks she's won. She's about to learn that sometimes the prey fights back. Update 3. Reddit, I'm still processing what happened at the anniversary party, but I promised you an update. What was supposed to be a celebration of my parents' 30-year marriage turned into the most dramatic night of my life. The Grandview Country Club looked perfect: white roses, string quartet, champagne flowing. 200 influential people mingling while Maya worked the room in her cream silk dress, introducing James as her fiancé. She kept giving me concerned sisterly smiles, completely confident she'd neutralized me after that psychiatric ambush. At 7:30 during cocktails, I walked to the front and asked the quartet to stop playing. Conversations died as people turned to look at me. Maya went pale. Good evening. Before dinner, I want to share something about my sister Maya's incredible charity work. Maya started toward me, but Dorothy and Rachel blocked her path. Sarah Chen was live streaming from 3 angles, FBI agents positioned near exits. Many of you donated to Maya's charity, Hope for Little Heroes, believing you were helping children with cancer. Tonight, I want you to meet some of those families. Mrs. Henderson stood up, wearing Emma's photo and a locket. The Rodriguezes rose, holding Miguel's picture. One by one, 12 families whose children Maya had exploited stood throughout the room. These families trusted Maya with their children's stories. They donated life savings, believing they were helping other kids. Instead, Maya stole their children's identities, used their photos without permission, and pocketed donations meant for cancer research. The room erupted. Maya broke free, rushing toward me with tears streaming. Tori, please stop. You're having another episode. Everyone, my sister has mental health issues. She's been making paranoid accusations. I played the recording from her burner phone, her voice clear through the sound system. Poor Tori, she really thinks she deserves that promotion. After the anniversary party, we can finally be together, James. James tried to leave, but FBI agent Martinez blocked him. Mr. Rodriguez, we need to discuss financial irregularities at your law firm. Maya's composure shattered. You don't understand. I built something beautiful. I gave people hope. So what if some money went elsewhere? I was doing good work. Mrs. Henderson walked forward, voice shaking but determined. My daughter Emma died 3 years ago. We sold our house and donated $50,000 because you said it would help other children. You're still using her photo, claiming she's alive and cancer-free. You built your empire on my dead child's face. Complete silence except for Maya's sobbing. She looked around at faces now filled with disgust. I'm not a bad person. I help people. I'm the good daughter. Dad walked to the microphone, face gray with shame. We owe everyone an apology. We knew something wasn't right with Maya's charity but chose to look away because it brought prestige. We failed those children and failed Tori by not protecting her from Maya's manipulation. Maya stared at our parents in shock. You're supposed to protect me. I'm your daughter too. You're a criminal, Dad replied. We won't be complicit anymore. The FBI arrested Maya and James right there. As they led her away in handcuffs, Maya looked back with pure hatred. You think you've won? You destroyed our family for strangers' dead kids. You're just as selfish as I am. But watching that police car drive away, I felt something unexpected, not satisfaction, just overwhelming sadness for the sister I thought I knew, who maybe never existed. The aftermath has been intense. Maya's arrest made national news because of the live stream. The FBI recovered $1.8 million for legitimate cancer research and defrauded families. Maya faces 15–20 years for wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. James lost his law license. Blackwood and Associates is probably finished. Most clients terminated contracts, but maybe that's for the best. We built our reputation on Maya's fake charity work. The most unexpected development has been with Marcus Thompson, our CFO. He'd been investigating Maya's irregularities independently and has been incredibly supportive. We've been spending time together, and something real might be developing. My parents and I are in therapy, rebuilding trust and understanding how we missed Maya's manipulation. The hardest realization is that Maya fundamentally lacks empathy. The sister I loved was largely performance. But I've learned something about myself. I spent years seeking approval from people who were manipulating me. I'm done with that. I'm learning to trust my instincts, value genuine relationships over family obligations, and stand up for what's right. Maya was right about one thing: I am selfish. Selfish enough to believe dead children's memories matter more than family reputation. Selfish enough to think grieving families deserve better than exploitation. Selfish enough to want a life built on truth instead of lies. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we'd never suspect. Trust your instincts, document everything, and remember the truth always comes out. You just have to be brave enough to help it along. Thank you for being with me through this, Reddit. I couldn't have done it without you.